Okay, I'm almost ready. Just give me a few more minutes.
It's been 5 hours.
You can't rush perfection, Keith Yeti. I simply have to look my best.
Is this why BFDI hotcakes are to ask me about yet?
Shut up!
Where is that again? Did you just fucking shoot me?
Me? No, that's ridiculous. But hypothetically speaking, if I did, you should be grateful that you're still alive. That's more than a lot of people can say. On an unrelated note, I have a video to record, so go away. I've spent a lot of time talking about DC4 and its interesting cast of characters. So if you've watched a lot of my content, you might already have an idea of how I feel about them. But I figured it would be a good idea to make a comprehensive video about it where I can say everything I have to say on this cast and then I can let them be. My thoughts on said cast are pretty straightforward. I love them, but I'm also sick of them. 26 episodes with these guys was maybe a few too many, especially with the change in writing starting with the merge. Credit where it's due, if I had to spend 26 episodes with any Disventure camp cast, I'd definitely pick these guys, but even then, they're not really bringing it like the Total Drama cast were. If I had to give this cast an overall rating, I think they'd get a solid B, maybe a B+ even, because I really think it's only just a few players that are bringing it down. It's just that those players are a lot more important than they should be. This season is why I'll never understand the argument that Priya overstayed her welcome in Reboot Season 2, because a lot of people in this season have that problem way worse. But because group punishment is a war crime, I'll address those problems when I get to the specific characters who caused them for the sake of fairness. Anyway, the rules are the same as usual. We'll be ranking all of the characters in the season from worst to best, with Schaeferless-inspired jingles punctuating each placement. So without further ado, let's get into that.
What happened? Are you okay?
Squid Games.
The worst character in DC4 is Derek. He does basically nothing all season, but he's still Derek, and I've historically never really liked the guy all that much. The only remotely interesting thing about him is that around halfway through the season, he basically stops existing. Because Stephen Gordon decided to forego what he previously cited as an incredible career-saving opportunity to voice in Disventure Camp so that he could be a part of Squid Game The Challenge, where he would get eliminated in the very first episode without a single second of screen time. Other than that, yeah, it's Derek. I think we all know what his problems are. Let's move on.
Silly Billy, please come back. We all miss you.
The second worst character in DC4 is Trevor. Why does he act like he's on crack cocaine? While these two are technically my least favorite, I don't really respect either Trevor or Derek enough to count them on this list beyond these brief anecdotes, so technically, they are the bottom spot, but if you only want to count serious characters that I bothered to analyze, then the bottom spot is up next. And if you've seen the season, then I think you can guess who it is. I actually had to think pretty hard about who would be in the bottom slot because I do think there are a few candidates. I really did want to be funny and put someone else, but after analyzing everyone thoroughly, I mean, come on, it has to be Logan. If you've watched all of my DC4 episode reviews, then you know how I feel about Logan. But for the sake of everyone who hasn't, and for everyone who wants to see me berate him, I'm going to try my best to compile everything into one concise explanation. And then hopefully I never have to think about Logan again. So, I don't like Logan. I think he's annoying and the worst written character in the season, but by the standards of DC4, that's actually not as bad as it seems. Let me put it this way, if Logan was in the DC2 rankings video, he'd be in the top 4. If he was a contender for the All-Stars rankings, he'd be top half. And if he were in Reality Resort, he'd probably be top 5 for me, and you can interpret that however you like. At the start of the season, Logan is genuinely very charismatic and has several interesting dynamics, such as with Alessio and Anastasia that make him very interesting to watch. He's a very earnest guy who wants to do right by his team, and early on in the season, I really found myself rooting for him to succeed. Him flipping on Ted did make sense. He chose to follow his heart, but it ended up putting him in a worse position strategically, which I think is a very interesting idea to explore. This was one of the big plot points that led to the Blue Team Alliance Wars that took place shortly thereafter, and I think the Blue Team's eliminations were better for it. So, great start for Logan. I would honestly argue that for the first quarter of the season, he's one of the most engaging characters in the cast. The problems start to arise once Spencer gets swapped over to the blue team, where suddenly Logan's personality shifts to,
oh wowza, I feel all funny when I'm around Spencer. What is this feeling?
Now, I do think that a story choosing to focus on a character's bisexual awakening can be very gripping and engaging. I adore that kind of story when it's done well. But knowing what I know about OddNations now, I can't help but feel like this plotline didn't have its heart in the right place. I know Jared's type. Tom Disventure Camp is his most profitable creation, and a lot of that comes from him kissing his twink boyfriend. So, hey, why not do that but again? There are a lot of good scenes that stem from this plotline, such as Logan's very emotional conversation with Richard. This scene is genuinely very sweet, and I can imagine a lot of queer/questioning people relating to it. But most of the time, I felt like the intention of this plotline was less to explore Logan questioning his sexuality, and more to show the buff himbo kissing men to make the patrons throw all their money at the show. You may argue that this is a very uncharitable read of OddNation cartoons. But by this point in time, it's very well documented that ONC will use deceptive, occasionally provocative imagery of gay men in their thumbnails for the express purpose of making more money. But I do think that Spencer is more indicative of this problem than Logan, so we'll circle back to this conversation when we get to his segment. I don't think I'd be so negative on these two if they had any sort of chemistry whatsoever, but I don't think that they do. Hate on Pool Party all you want, I think these two actually had something going on, and I attribute that entirely to Tony and Maganda's performances. Because Logan might be written to be bisexual, but I doubt the idea of him ever getting together with a woman was even a thought in the writers' minds. Anyway, not long after Spencer swaps teams comes episode 12, where Logan throws sand into an elephant's eyes. Prior to this point, I was slowly starting to like Logan less and less as the episodes went on, but this was the moment where I realized that I just didn't like him anymore. And when I first brought up this opinion, a lot of people got on my case, saying that I was overreacting and that this was a stupid reason for me to dislike him. And if that's what you think, go ahead. I can't force you to agree with my opinions. But I feel like you should keep in mind that some people are going to react to different subject matter differently from you. I do not enjoy watching certain animals in pain, so when a piece of media presents that to me, I am not going to respond well to it. It's not so bad to the point where it triggers me, but I don't like it, and I think it's perfectly fine for me to not like Logan because of what he did. But just to make it absolutely clear, I didn't just immediately start hating Logan because of this episode. He was on a downwards trajectory for a while. This was just the nail in the coffin. But if you want a more objective reason as to why I don't like this scene, there are a few. I dislike this scene, A, because Logan is hurting an endangered animal, B, because the argument that he saved Richard is stupid. If you throw sand in an elephant's eyes, you are going to make it angry, and by doing that, you put everyone in danger, not just Richard, meaning you are more likely to kill someone than you would if you just did nothing. And lastly, because this scene marked a notable change in Logan's character for me. Before this episode, he might not have been the brightest, but he was a wholesome, kind-hearted guy. After this episode, he comes off more as an ignorant fuck-up who has no idea what the hell he's doing. And that problem only gets worse come the merge. One of the biggest points that people like to use against Logan is how often he flips on his allies, and while he definitely does do it a lot, maybe a little bit too much, my problem was never the fact that he was a flipper, it's how everyone reacts to him being a flipper. Logan gets away with literally everything. Even though he flips on most of his allies, only Ted and Linda actually stay mad at him for that. Everyone else is just willing to keep on trusting him, even when they should know that he's prone to betray them. Case in point,
Logan, you flipped?
Still one of the funniest lines in the season, by the way. This is one elimination after Logan betrayed Zade, who was very vocal about how he felt betrayed. Oh, speaking of, isn't it so cool how Logan threw Zade under the bus in episode 20, leading to Anastasia turning on him without even talking to him first? You know, like Jake would. And then a few episodes later, Logan admits that he lied to her and doesn't feel bad about it because it's part of the game. And not only is she cool with that, but she lets him win the challenge. But wait, apparently he does feel bad about it because that's what he says to Jade in episode 25. So then why did he tell Anastasia that he didn't? What does he gain from that? Either he lied in the first instance and shot himself in the foot for no reason, he lied in the second instance so that he could sympathy bait Jade, or it's a writing mistake, which on its own is fine. Basically, every piece of media has writing mistakes. The problem is when those little mistakes start to stack up. Although, admittedly, in Logan's case, I think it's less writing mistakes and more just dubious writing quality. Logan constantly showed himself to be an unreliable ally, played a very wishy-washy game, and screwed over several people. So how come no one in the jury actually talks about that? All we get is Isabelle saying that he took too long to start playing. I'm not saying they should despise him for voting them off in a competition show, but I feel like a lot more of them should disapprove of his gameplay. Why is Amelie in his jury stand? I know the in-universe reason is that she's impressed that he managed to vote her out. That's stupid. She should want to root for Jade. Because during the final 3 vote, her criteria for voting is that she wants to vote in favor of the person who played most like her, which is Jade. Not Logan. Zade doesn't even get to go off on him. By the end of the season, even he's forgiven Logan, who barely even gave an apology in the first place. Imagine trying to tell a story about bisexuality and overcoming expectations only to tell a story about white privilege. What also bothers me is that throughout DC4 and even in the first episode of DC5, the show and characters like to characterize Natalia as a flipper, and she herself cites it as a problem with her game that she wants to change. So if it's a problem when Natalia does it, why is Logan getting a pass? It is so obvious to me that Logan is presented as this wholesome good boy super himbo because that's how the characters view him, how Jared views him, and how he desperately wants us, the audience, to view him. How many scenes are there where Logan says or does something shitty and then responds by putting on this sad puppy dog face? Remember all those times where he brings up his swim team's homophobia even when it barely matters to the conversation? Remember that time when he brought up how he got bronze at the Olympics? In response to Hannah breaking down over her dead mom? Some of you might argue that I shouldn't be so hard on the guy since at the end of the day, he does mean well and he's truly a good guy at heart. I don't care. Connor didn't have any malicious intentions when he deleted Allie's save data, but I don't think anyone would blame her for getting mad at him for that. Logan's edit tries to get us to sympathize with him at almost every turn, and I'm personally not about that. Not because I think Logan is some evil monster who deserves to be burned at the stake, no, I just think his writing is indicative of all of Disventure Camp's bad writing habits. Past a certain point, Logan Bell does not feel like an organic character within the season. He feels like a product made to sell it. While they do differ in a lot of ways, the core building blocks of Logan's character are basically copy-pasted from Tom minus the spy angle, and it really feels to me like Logan was designed to fit that same mold so that the season could make more money. Granted, I'm much less inclined to give Jared and ONC the benefit of the doubt now than I was when the season first came out, and I would be lying if I said that my feelings towards their business practices haven't affected my interpretation of their work. But when I look at other poster characters like Owen, 4, or even Tom and Jake, I can feel the soul that brings all of them to life, and Logan does not have that. He feels like a soulless character to me. Despite all that, I don't hate Logan the same way that I hate all of my other ops. Rhea is just fun to hate. I can, and have, spent a long time shit-talking Rhea in my videos, and I've thoroughly enjoyed doing so. She is my worstie, and we have a bond that only true enemies share. It brings me no end of joy to know that my videos have actually hurt her reputation, and it's one of the things that helps me sleep at night. One from Teapot is annoying the hell out of me, and I honestly worry that her dominant presence within the series is going to seriously hurt the quality of the show. But at least her concept is interesting and her VA is killing it. Yuki Maeda from SDRA2 can eat shit and die, and if he's your favorite character from that game, you're probably really boring. I hate Painful Dreamers so much that I decided to shoehorn them into this video just to tell you how much I hate them. This is a passionate hatred that I have for this duo, and even though their tracks are objectively good, the fact that they did not O2 is one of our greatest failures as a society. And you know what? While we're at it, I don't like Snailians. I know a good chunk of people discovered Mashup Week through me, and as I found out, most of them main Snailians. Like, really? This cast has Rick, Madion, Scathead, Hot Ones, Tyler and the Grinch, Monster Mouse, among so many others. So why Snailians? Why would you do this to yourself? Why would you do this to me? You're telling me that both of these bums beat another— I'm making myself upset. You get the idea. That's like passionate hatred, the type that I think is fun to talk about and share with the world. But Logan Bell just doesn't do that for me. He's a lame character and a lame winner. And now we're leaving him behind forever. I don't think the writers enjoyed Marissa.
I enjoyed Marissa.
Yeah, I know you did, and I know that the fandom did, but when you separate these two and analyze them as individuals, you can define Anastasia by so many different character traits and dynamics. Meanwhile, Marissa is just Anastasia's military girlfriend. You can try to tell me that there's more to her than that, and honestly, I think there could be. But at the end of the day, I think most of us can agree that Marissa was done really dirty by OddNations. Her only relevant dynamics are with Anastasia and Linda, which is 2, the same number as Alessio, who got booted first. You could argue that she had something going on with Diego at a certain point, but let's be honest, these two just got put together because they were boring. Marissa and Linda are a decent pair, they just don't have that much sauce. I do like how even though they don't always get along, Marissa's still willing to help Linda when she's been ostracized from the group. I think that shines a light on how much Marissa values her family and how she probably gravitates towards Linda because she reminds her of her own mom. I feel like their dynamic is very similar to Logan and Richard's, but unfortunately it didn't last nearly as long. Probably because ONC wanted to prioritize Linda's rivalry with Anastasia above her friendship with Marissa. And honestly, given how things turned out, I think that was probably the right decision. Because while Marissa does work well with her, I don't think she had much reason to stay in the game, since Richard was very easily able to take up the mantle of Linda's support after she left, and I think he does a better job. That leaves Marissa, and in 99% of instances, it does feel like Marissa is resigned to being Anastasia's support. Outside of the first few episodes of the season, Marissa is rarely ever the focal character of the two, and I think that's a real shame. Because Gabelli had that same problem. Neither of them were ever relevant at the same time, and that kind of hurt their chemistry. Which kind of annoys me now that I think about it, because Mathlete and Disventure did not have this problem, despite those couples not even getting together. Her relationship with the military raises a lot of questions, but we never really got any answers for them. Why doesn't she want to enlist? Is it her own fears? Does she want to pursue something else? Does she have some sort of moral opposition to the military? What's up with all that? We don't need a full-blown exploration of this, but I do think some more information could have shown a light on who Marissa is as a person and what her values are. But for someone who went out in episode 9, there's honestly nothing wrong with that. She served her role, set a lot of things in motion, and her elimination kicked off Anastasia's big character arc. And while I was fine with her returning because it meant we got to see their relationship continue, I question if it was really necessary for her to come back. I think she had plenty of nice scenes, the one in episode 18 especially comes to mind, and I did enjoy the tiebreaker in episode 19, even if the hurricane line was really cringe. But looking at everyone else who possibly could have come back, I think a lot of them had a lot more potential to offer than Marissa. I really wish I had more to say on her, but I also wish she got more meaningful content for me to talk about. According to ONC's YouTube polls, Marissa is the least popular character in this cast, which is unfortunate, but I do understand. Outside of the first few episodes and episode 18, she was never really able to pop off the same way that the other characters were, and maybe a rematch season could have fixed that, but alas, we'll never know. Marissa isn't second from the bottom because she's a bad character with a lot of negative aspects. I just feel that most everyone else's positive aspects are more relevant and more fully realized than Marissa's. So while I don't dislike Marissa, I don't think she came anywhere close to reaching her full potential, and for that reason, she's second from the bottom.
But since we're all gonna die, there's one more secret I feel I have to share with you.
Here's a piece of advice I'd like to give to anyone aiming to create their own TD fan series. If you want to create total drama but serious, where you take out all the comedy and swap it out for social strategy, you are fighting a major uphill battle. I think the strategy in shows like Survivor and Big Brother are interesting and fun because the strategists are real people, and real people are unpredictable and have a lot more nuance than fictional characters. Not that I think every fan series needs to be part comedy, but if you're gonna take the comedy out of total drama, then you probably should find something equally compelling to replace it with. Because I think comedy is a very important part of total drama and a lot of its fan works, and when done right, it can really enhance the end product. But when it's done poorly, you get whatever the hell Benji is going for. I know that a lot of the fandom really likes Benji. He's unquestionably one of the most popular characters in the cast, and I'm not going to pretend that I don't see what they see. I really do appreciate Benji for the role that he plays in the season. He's a very goofy and silly character who serves to bring some much needed levity to the show. Something All Stars didn't have any of this, and that's part of the reason why it was so bad. When it came to balancing the tone for the first half of DC4, Benji was genuinely a very important piece of that puzzle. Without him, the pre-merge very easily could have ended up with a lot of melodrama, and I know that most of us would not have wanted that. Objectively speaking, I do think that Benji is a well-written character, and what he provides to the season is very important. The reason why I put him this low is that even though I do appreciate what he tries to bring to the season, I just personally don't think he's very funny. I'm not gonna sit here and lecture you on what should and should not be considered funny because that's about the most pretentious thing I think I could do right now, but I personally think that Benji's brand of humor is kinda lazy. For the most part, Benji's humor is focused around him saying and doing mildly inappropriate or stupid things, such as him accidentally making an innuendo, coming up with silly strategies, and making several comments that make other people look at him funny. I like to call this Discord VC humor, because when you're on a voice call with some friends and the atmosphere is just right, anyone can post just about anything they want, and if it's stupid enough, it will make everyone laugh. As an example, I've never really laughed at anything that Benji said, but when my friends in VC quote Benji, I think it's funny. I don't know if OddNations was intentionally trying to capture that style of humor. If they were, I give them kudos for trying, but I don't think Disventure Camp can really replicate the atmosphere of a 3 AM VC. I also think that a lot of people have the perception that comedic writing is easy and anyone can do it, while dramatic writing is for the pros. When in reality, it takes a lot of skill to write either of them. Writing jokes isn't always easy, and sometimes you really have to work to make your script funny. And with Benji, I think they kept going for the low-hanging fruit. Let's take the dump truck joke from episode 9 to illustrate my point, and I'm gonna be a bit of a nerd here, so hear me out. I think this joke is paced very poorly. Benji just starts talking about everyone's butts, unprompted, and starts applying some weird pseudoscience about how larger butts fit different animals, and then tells Zade that he has a dump truck. But none of that is actually conducive to anything. He just does all of that for no reason, and then they move on. It feels like this part of the script had a segment that read, "Insert Benji joke here," and then someone wrote this whole bit. A lot of his jokes feel very forced to me. A lot of them don't have that spark of comedic rhythm, and as such, they don't really flow with the episodes very well. And it's not like ONC can't write funny jokes. Ivy's "Chef's Got Cake" line that happens right after that exchange genuinely got a laugh out of me. I just think that they kinda dropped the ball with Benji, but fortunately for him, he is more than his sense of humor, and he does have plenty of dynamics that I like. I think that he's a good foil for Hannah, especially early on. They have a very nice relationship, and it's fun to watch them play the middle during the pre-merge. Tringy is also a thing, and despite ONC giving very little attention to these two as a pairing, I just think they're really sweet together, but more on that later. I also like how he gives Zade an outlet to be open about his feelings for Ivy. At this point, I think it's hard to deny that Zade really got shafted in favor of Ivy, but I think his friendship with Benji is nice, and they balance out each other quite well. And I especially like his friendship with Jade, because he's one of the only few characters that gets her to open up. Jade is very closed off most of the time, but when she hangs out with Benji, he brings out a sillier, dorkier side of her that I do wish we got to see more of. But even though he does have his bright spots, I feel like the fandom really oversells Benji, and admittedly that has negatively affected how I feel about him. So much of Benji's fandom treats him like an ooh-woo soft bean who must be protected at all costs. He's just a silly little guy, I love him so much. You know how like Jared thought people would respond to Logan. And that gets tiring after a while. Probably the worst example for me was when Ivy was making fun of Benji's fake idol, and a lot of people got really mad at her because how could she be so mean to Benji? Y'all, this is a 21-year-old man. Enjoy the character as much as you want, but when you start to talk about him like he's a dog, that's when I start to look at you funny. But even then, I do think it's funny how Logan, who seemed artificially created to fill that role in the fandom, just got completely glossed over for the artificial funny man. Ultimately, Benji reads to me like he was engineered to be the funny meme guy of DC4, which is a term I like to use to describe a character in any given fandom who, for one reason or another, is turned into a meme by the community, giving that character an intensely powerful comedic aura that permanently affects the culture of the fandom. It's clear to me that Benji was created to fill this role, but you can't force funny meme guy status, it has to come naturally. In my friend group, DC4's funny meme guy is Ivy Berkey, followed by Ted Gordon, followed by Linda, followed by Amelie, followed by Dead Mom Girl, followed by Alessio. Benji is not even close. I don't dislike Benji, but as far as this season goes, I'm not really impressed by his output, and if it were up to me, I probably wouldn't put him in fans versus favorites. Still, I know I'm in the minority for that, so if you really like Benji, then all the power to you. Okay, so I know that putting Benji bottom 3 definitely made some people mad at me, but I already know that this next segment is gonna be a rough one. I've been in this fandom for quite some time, and I've seen several characters stir up a lot of unpleasant discourse. Tom, Jake, Gabby, and Yule all come to mind. People are very opinionated on these characters, and there's someone in DC4 who fits that same mold. So while I do understand that very unpleasant people on Twitter are going to take issue with me for this, I feel like giving you anything less than my full, honest opinions would be disingenuous to you, myself, and to the video. So, when I say that I don't think Jade Tonko is a very good character, I'm saying that with the hopes that you will keep an open mind and hear me out. I don't like the fact that I put her this low either. Jade made the finale for a reason, and believe me, I do see the vision. But I also think that OddNations didn't really deliver on that vision. And I'm not saying that she's boring because she has a very calm, low-key personality. You can write a character that way and really make it work. Giorno Giovanna is one of my favorite fictional characters of all time, but as one of the protagonists in a series called JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, his introduction is suspiciously normal. He does a few weird things, sure, but most of that ties into his magical powers. Personality-wise, he comes off as very cool-headed and not nearly as eccentric as his predecessors. But the more we get to see of him, the more subtle aspects of his personality get revealed, and we slowly start to get a sense of who this guy is and what his values are. And by the time that picture fully formed, I felt like all the time I spent invested in this character was paid off. Giorno might not be a character with an in-your-face personality, but he's still a fully realized person by the end of the story. With Jade, I can tell that ONC tried to do something similar. The problem is that a lot of Jade's character traits, to me, feel tacked on and underexplored, to the point where her character feels less whole than the sum of her parts. I don't think that Jade is lacking in character traits or personality. She has a lot of those. My problem is that the writers failed to build upon any of them in a satisfying way. Jade has a lot of different angles. She has an immense passion for marine biology, which she got from her mother's, highlighting a cause that's very important to her. She's a nerd who enjoys escapist superhero stories. She has trouble opening up to people, and part of that stems from her vitiligo, which had a big impact on her life. You could take any one of these angles as the foundation for her character while using the rest as added detail, and then throughout the story you could build on that to create a fully realized image of who Jade is as a person. But ONC doesn't do this. Instead, the most prominent thing about Jade is her strategic gameplay, and this is what her narrative wants to focus on most of the time. I've said this before when it comes to total drama-inspired shows, but strategy is not a valid substitute for personality and narrative arcs. Personality dictates strategy. Scott and Alejandro are some of the most noteworthy strategists in total drama, and I enjoy watching them play the game. But the reason why I enjoy watching them strategize so much isn't because they're god-tier players at the game, but because of how their personalities inform their strategy. Scott can't manipulate people with his good looks and suave personality because he doesn't have those. He sabotages his team so that he can cast doubt on his teammates and pick them off as he sees fit. And because he's not especially smart, strong, or social, this type of underhanded gameplay makes sense for him. Alejandro doesn't pick off his threatening team members by throwing the challenges because his team already sucks and he doesn't have to. Instead, he uses his good looks and charm to win people over and stay in their good graces. And he does this because he grew up in a household that heavily cherished these traits. I think Jade falls short in this regard because it's hard to define what her brand of strategy actually is. Heather is tyrannical, Alejandro is a charming manipulator, Scott plays the fool, Fiore plays innocent, Alec befriends the right people to keep a low profile, Rhea tries to kill everyone, Jade... Well, we don't actually know about Jade, but we know she's really good at it. What makes this worse is that Jade has a much harder time bouncing off of other characters compared to the rest of the cast. With a lot of characters in DC4, specific dynamics highlight certain character traits for the people involved. Logan and Anastasia's dynamic, for example, highlights how competitive they both are. So if the writers want to highlight that aspect of Logan's character, they can have him interact with Anastasia and make it happen. Given that Jade is a less expressive character, I think it's especially important for her to have good dynamics, since other characters can draw out her more subtle traits. When Jade's interacting with Benji, we get to see a warmer, nerdier side to her character that I really enjoy watching. But Spencer and Isabelle don't really play to her personality, they play to her strategy, and because most of their scenes are about strategy, Jade spends most of her screen time in gamebot mode. I give Spencer a pass because even though most of his scenes with Jade do focus on strategy, I do think they have something going on a personal level that does work for me, and we'll get to that when we get to Spencer's section. On the other hand, sure, Isabelle forcing a tie between Anastasia and Marissa is cool and all, and Jade feeling guilty about it shows that their approach to the game isn't the exact same, but outside of that one moment, Jade and Isabelle's entire relationship kind of boils down to Isabelle glazing Jade and Jade awkwardly standing by. If the goal was to give Jade some sort of moral test, pairing her with someone more confidently ruthless like Anastasia, Amelie, or Ted probably would have been a better way to go about that. Because as it stands, Jade's conflict after the tiebreaker is so fucking lame. I do not care that she's having a mini arc where her main struggle is, oh my god, am I a bad person? Give her an actual person to explore that with. You cannot expect people to care about a character's internal struggles when you don't build them up properly and don't give them an outlet to work off of. But even with these issues, a lot of people still really like Jade, and I can see why. But at the same time, I also see why Silly Billy made fun of her for sounding like a robot, because she does. Depending on the scene, Jade speaks like she's plugged into a thesaurus, and while the intention was clearly to make her sound smarter, it just comes across as unnatural to me. Take this line, for example.
Logan's forgiveness is exactly what I needed going into the finale, but for some reason, I still feel the self-doubt coalescing within me.
Yeah, people don't talk like that. But even with all of that in mind, there is still something that I think Jade really has going for her. Basically everything about Jade makes more sense if we subscribe to the theory that she has autism. And if a few minor details were changed to highlight that better, the majority of my problems with her character would be, if not solved, at least greatly improved upon. But in execution, there's a lot of small details that start to add up, and it kind of ruins that vision. Like, I'm sorry, if your hyperfixation is marine biology, you are never picking up a baby turtle off the beach. And I'd love to end it there, I really would, but I've been doing this for a while now, so I know exactly what type of response I'm gonna get by putting Jade low. No, Jade's placement on this list has nothing to do with her skin color. I'm honestly shocked that I even need to clarify that. We do not always need to break characters down to their demographics when criticizing their writing. I'm not going to go into too much detail on this point, but I distinctly remember checking Twitter right after the finale had happened. And there were a few people who didn't even bother using the finalists' names, just referring to them as a black woman and the white man. And while I think those people were airing out their frustrations in the exact wrong way, I think it's fair for people to be mad at Logan on Jade's behalf. Because between the two of them, Jade really got the short end of the stick. Think about it. We're given so much information about Logan's backstory, his wants, his desires, his fears, his personal struggles, and so much more information about him. But Jade doesn't get that same level of attention. Sure, there are moments where she does offhandedly mention these things, but with Logan, it was always treated like a big moment. With Jade, it's like they intentionally wanted to draw attention away from her deeper characterization. And what makes me absolutely positive of this fact is that Benji's jury question was the perfect time for a show-stopping moment where Jade allowed herself to be vulnerable with the jury, to speak to them as a person and not a strategist. But she outright tells them that she wants to be defined by her game moves. And while I'm nearly positive that the idea behind this stems from Jade having low self-confidence, I feel like the scene falls flat because she wasn't given the proper focus and setup to make it pay off. And if you're gonna tell me, oh, Jade would never have a big moment like that because she's a reserved character and it's not like her to be vulnerable, respectfully, I think you're wrong. Every so often, we get to see glimpses of a more expressive, more complete version of Jade. We see it when she talks to Benji, when she talks to Anastasia, and especially when she yells at Logan. There is a nuanced, engaging character here, but I don't think ONC put in enough work to bring her to life the way she deserved. And I hate that I have to say that, but ultimately I prefer a character who succeeds at being good rather than a character who fails at being great. I love the idea of Jade, and I'm happy that so many people seem to really like her. She is more than just her labels, and I love that she herself subscribes to that idea without making it her entire personality. But I don't think the execution lives up to her potential. Not the worst character by any means, but it really is a shame because she easily could have been one of the best.
I'm Wilfred Brimley, and I'd like to talk to you for a few minutes about diabetes.
When you're writing a series like Disventure Camp, the elimination order is a balancing act. You have to consider which characters have more to offer the narrative and which ones can go earlier. That might sound a bit complicated, but a lot of that does come naturally to you as you write. Most of the time, you will know what to do. But sometimes I'll watch one of these seasons and see one character do pretty well and think to myself, yeah, they're good, but this other guy would have been way better. And if it hasn't clicked already, this is Richard's section. I do like Richard, and I think the fact that a character as good as him is C tier relative to the rest of the cast speaks volumes about how much I like them. As a human being, he's phenomenal, and I wish that every old person in real life was like him. But Richard is a lot like Wada from Tetro Pink in the sense that I like him, but the other two people in his trio are just way more interesting. And the fact that he was the last one standing is utterly laughable. He has plenty of positives. His relationship with Linda, Logan, and Natalia are all very well written, and they each highlight something different about his character. With Logan, Richard is in coach mode, encouraging Logan in the challenges, but also giving him sound advice when he's going through tough times. I think the scene where Logan comes out to Richard is genuinely very sweet, and I like that Richard uses his experience as an older gay man to help someone who's questioning their sexuality. He doesn't have as much going on with Natalia, but I really like the pairing of the out-of-touch boomer and the terminally online trans woman. I think they make a really funny pair. Natalia flipping during the Marissa vote is the only time where I feel like Richard actually gets to engage with the strategy. Otherwise, he just kinda does whatever Spencer or Isabelle tell him to do. For the most part, Richard doesn't have a lot of personal agency in DC4. He's an important part of Logan's arc and to a lesser degree Natalia's, but he never really gets to do anything important on his own. But I definitely think that he could have, because we do get to see glimpses of him beyond the mold of a support character. In my opinion, Richard is at his best when he's interacting with Linda, because unlike his other dynamics where he primarily serves a mentor role, with Linda he feels a lot more real. He does support Linda when she needs it, but unlike Logan, she's not an athlete. She's another parent just like him, and I enjoy watching these two relate to and help each other on that level. I think Linda is pretty inarguably the main character of this dynamic, despite Richard making it further, but I still feel like he has more agency with Linda than he does with the others. I guess the best way to describe it is that with Logan, Richard feels like a support character. With Linda, he feels like a secondary protagonist. And if his other dynamics leaned into that side of his character a little more, he'd definitely be higher on the list. But the thing about Richard is that he's in that weird middle section of the elimination order, so he needed just enough screen time to justify his placement, but not too much that we'd feel robbed when he got eliminated. And all things considered, I think ONC threads that needle fairly well. I think he probably could have gone a few episodes earlier, and narratively speaking, I think either Ivy or Linda probably deserved that placement more, but I'm not upset that he made it as far as he did. I enjoy Richard, but in terms of content, he's definitely lacking when compared to the rest of the cast. His biggest contributions to the season are his lovely personality and good vibes, and he absolutely delivers on both. I just feel that everyone above him had a bit more to offer. Richard is very cool, and I like him, but Ted Gordon is better.
You are an idiot!
I think it's safe to say that Logan is easily the most hated character from this cast, but number 2 is probably his closest friend in the game. Tragically, this is another instance where the final 3 of the season all end up relatively low on my tier list, but compared to All-Stars, this is somehow an improvement. I'm not happy about this though, because unlike Jade, who I didn't want to rank low because I knew the fandom would get mad at me, I didn't want to put Anastasia this low because doing so makes me mad. I wanted to like her so fucking badly, and for the first half of the season, I really did. For the first 11 episodes, she was easily my favorite character, no question. She was confident, assertive, she was a game player, but she also had a heart under all those layers, and I was really enjoying her. I liked how she had an attitude, but wasn't overly villainous like a lot of other characters that you tend to see in this archetype. If you know anything about Russia as a country, or modeling as an industry, then you know exactly how Anastasia ended up the way she is. Her headstrong attitude isn't arbitrary, it's a direct result of her growing up in such a ruthless environment. Anastasia spent most of her career being objectified by men, and had it drilled into her head that her beauty would eventually fade, and when that happened, everyone would move on. I feel like that's just enough backstory detail to win people over without overindulging. I really do like her concept. This is one of my favorite character archetypes just in general. Point is, I think Anastasia had the best start of any character in the season. Her friendship with Logan was very endearing. I like how they both challenged each other physically while still clearly caring for each other. And Marissa was really cute when they were on screen. They had a lot of good chemistry going on, and I wish we got to see more of them. And her entire rivalry with Linda was so fun to watch. Seeing these two go back and forth really caught my attention, and the tug-of-war tiebreaker between the both of them made for a very strong dramatic moment. Everything about her was great, and the moment episode 11 came to an end, I was already theorizing on where they would take Anastasia next. I was so excited. What I failed to consider, however, is that I was watching Disventure Camp, and this show is not consistent with its writing. The core problem with Anastasia is that she's meant to be a super duper awesome girl boss who has beauty, brains, and brawn, and for the first half of the season, they saw this vision through. But at a certain point in the merge, she starts to lose her brains. You ever notice how during a lot of the votes during the merge, Anastasia just does whatever other people tell her to do? Sure, she strong-armed Natalia into voting for Richard, but that only happened because Spencer... I want to say he manipulated her, but looking back, did he really even do that? All he did was go up to her and was all like, "Hey, I know you don't like me, but Natalia sus. Get her to vote for Logan or Richard to prove her loyalty." I understand why she'd be wary of Natalia, but why is she going along with Spencer's plan? What does she gain from that? Anastasia actually has a few instances of "I can't believe I have to work with Spencer" syndrome. Every once in a while, she or Natalia will occasionally suffer from an affliction where they get really angry that they have to work with Spencer. They don't. In every instance, they have the numbers to vote against or around him, but they just go with his plans for some reason. Now, I know this might seem like a nitpick, but I think for Anastasia, this is a problem because one of her defining character flaws is her paranoia. And when rewatching this season, I started to realize how selective her paranoia is. So, Anastasia, explain this to me. Why did you decide to flip on Zade based on what Hannah and Logan told you without even talking to the guy who's meant to be your friend? When earlier in the season, you were perfectly fine letting Spencer sweet talk you, even though you expressly stated that you do not like him. Why is it that Natalia flipping is such a big concern that you need to constantly keep an eye on her, while Logan is flipped like 3 times by this point and you don't even care to address that? Girlie, I need you to listen to me. If Jared is holding you hostage and forcing you to keep the yaoi slop going, I need you to blink 3 times. We all love and care about you, and if you need help, we will get it to you. Keith Yeti has been training for this his entire life. I don't have a problem with Anastasia's paranoia getting in the way of her strategy. I think it's important for a character like her to have some sort of flaw that stops her from being an unbeatable Mary Sue. But it's not consistent. Logan and Zade are her friends, while Spencer and Natalia aren't nearly as close with her. I could maybe excuse a lot of her behavior in the merge if her paranoia affected one of these duos, but when it only affects one of each, and specifically the 2 that Jared can't use for yaoi bait thumbnails, that is not a pattern that I can ignore. Sometimes it felt like whenever ONC needed someone eliminated and they didn't quite know how to get the cast to turn against them, they just had Anastasia get mad at them for like no reason. Or, in instances where her reasoning makes sense, the series of events that got us there don't. Zade's elimination specifically is just so awful for her character. I spoke about this at length when I discussed episode 20, but to quickly summarize, as the episode is currently set up, trying to eliminate Zade in a 4-2 vote with Anastasia and Logan as 2 of the votes against him does not work. Why is this character, who is meant to be intelligent, blindly trusting a known flipper and a total stranger? Their logic genuinely isn't even good. Hannah's whole point is, "Oh yeah, Zade sucks. Remember when he leaked information to you? He's not trustworthy. He voted out Benji, who's basically like my brother," and really, Anna, you're not even gonna question that. Sure, you could maybe string together that line of logic to come to the conclusion that Zade leaked, but do you know what a smart character would also consider in that situation? That the known flipper and the total stranger are lying to them, or that the flipper is flipping and that the stranger is misinformed because they don't know Logan like that. Now you may argue, "Oh no, Logan is like her closest friend. It makes perfect sense that she would believe him in that scenario." And I'm like, I think by that point in the merge, she spent about as much time with Zade as she did with Logan in the pre-merge, so I think they'd be about even by that point. But screw all of that, I guess. Come the elimination, Anna is super pissed at Zade, doesn't even talk to him about anything, and then come the finale when Zade asks her why she fucking did that, she doesn't even give him an answer. Her response is basically, "I voted you because I betrayed you, please forgive me." Now, following that terrible elimination, I was still very apprehensive of Anastasia, but I was still willing to try and move past it because I was still trying to hold on to the fondness that I had for her in the pre-merge. But then, episode 22 happened, and after what she did in this episode, I could no longer make any excuses for her. When I talked about episode 22, I spent a good amount of time talking about the confrontation between Anna and Logan. For me, this is easily one of the worst scenes in the season, and it all has to do with how Anastasia is written and portrayed. I'm going to give you a quick TLDR of what Anastasia does in this episode, and I want you to keep in mind that this character is supposed to be smart. So TLDR, Anastasia has Hannah pinned to the ground, but before she can do anything, Logan steps up and admits that he lied about Zade, and that he doesn't feel bad about it because it was a game move. Hannah steps up and is all like, Anastasia, what the fuck, are you gonna let him get away with that? And then Anastasia, angered by Hannah's words, pins her to the ground and goes into a spiel about how she's not someone whose paranoia will be exploited, she's nobody's tool. And then she lets Logan win the challenge. She then has a confessional where she's like, yes, I'm mad at Logan, but I need to use my anger smartly. I'm going to keep him around for jury purposes. And then right after that, she tells him that while she still likes him as a friend, they shouldn't work together. If you haven't already realized all the problems with what I just said, then let me explain them to you. For starters, Anastasia just nuked her game. Anastasia, ma'am, girly pop. After Marissa left, the boys were your only close allies, and 2 eliminations ago, you voted off one of them to solidify your bonds with the other. Presumably, you let him win the challenge for similar reasons. So why the hell are you going out of your way to tell him, hey, let's not work together? You don't have any other options. If it wasn't for Jade approaching Anastasia on a fucking whim to include her on the Isabelle blindside, Anastasia just gets eliminated here. Everyone else wanted her gone. Secondly, why is she being so charitable to Logan? I know that these two were friends, but it seems awfully convenient that she forgives him right away, doesn't it? The episode seems to argue that she puts her feelings aside so that her emotions don't cloud her judgment going forward. You know, as if this is somehow a strategically motivated decision. Ignoring the fact that this decision basically dooms her game like I just brought up, why does she let him win the challenge? If she really wants to look out for herself, she could have just easily cut him down and won immunity. She says in her confessional that she wants to keep him around for vaguely defined jury purposes, but what does she mean by that? Are you telling me that she let Logan win a very important immunity challenge at the final 5 so that she could potentially get his jury vote down the road? Girlie, he's locked in for you. Why are you wasting all that energy over a guaranteed vote? If you're trying to work people over so that they'll vote you in the jury, maybe focus on Isabelle, who you have beef with, or Hannah, whose closest ally you voted off 3 days ago. Locking in the jury is important, sure, but maybe you should make sure you can actually get there first. I know it might sound complicated when I explain it like that, but the problem is fairly straightforward. Anastasia, who's shown to be a very volatile and strategic character, was just told that her close ally betrayed her. Her decision to let him get away with it scot-free not only contradicts her established personality, but it also puts her in a terrible position in the game, which to me reveals the actual tragedy of Anastasia as a character, and it's that despite how she may be portrayed, she was never a character who could win. Her relationship is often sidelined for 2 MLM pairings that never even happened. And while she's portrayed as this highly capable, intelligent woman, I can't help but feel that she ends up as just another cog in the Logan Bell machine. Anastasia is a tool for the writers to make drama happen. I do believe they intended to tell a deep, complex story with her, but because they could never keep her characterization consistent, they never could. I guess they do have a plan for her since she is in season 5, but honestly, I'm kind of tired of the idea that season 5 is going to fix a lot of the characters that weren't written well in seasons 3 and 4. So for all of you that like to run your mouth about, oh, nobody's giving this season a chance, it's only been 1 episode, lest you forget, the vast majority of the DC community did not like All-Stars, and for a lot of us, season 4 was this show's second chance. And while I still think that it is the best that Disventure Camp has ever given us, there are still a lot of really amateurish mistakes here. And aside from maybe Logan, I think that Anastasia is the clearest example of this, which is a shame because she had so much potential. She really did impress me early on, and those early episodes are the reason why I put her this high. But looking through every episode of season 4 and seeing how she ended up, I can't help but feel a little disappointed.
Columbia.
When I first began covering DC4, there were 3 characters that I had on-site beef with. First was Benji, who we already covered, and then there was Disventure. I hated this pairing early on because it felt to me like ONC was gearing up to do the same routine all over again. Which, to be clear, I have nothing against MLM couples, but I had a problem with Disventure specifically because A, they had no chemistry, and B, because ONC was, and still is, well known for using MLM couples as a tool to boost ratings, prioritizing the views over the quality of the writing. So because of that, when I was watching Dispenser interact, much like with Benji and Logan, I felt like ONC was trying to sell me on a product, and I thought it was very artificial. Surprisingly though, this plotline actually wrapped up very quickly, around episode 5 or so, and while Spencer has a lot more going for him, I think it's pretty inarguable to say that this relationship is Diego's big thing in the season. This is his spot, by the way. I know it took some setup, but this is Diego's spot. I put him above Benji, Jade, and Anastasia, and I stand by that. Everyone in C tier is someone that I can genuinely say that I like, despite the writing for them not always being there. And in that sense, I think Diego is the inverse of Anastasia. Whereas she started off really good and got worse over time, Diego had a really awkward start but got better after his elimination. I really like Diego's personality on paper. After watching all the audition tapes, he was one of my favorites and one of the characters I was most excited to see. I know Diego does have his fans, and those fans will probably get mad at me for saying this, but I gotta be honest here. As it is portrayed in the episodes, Diego's crush on Spencer, to me, comes off as pretty creepy. And that primarily has to do with the way he goes about showing his affection. I understand that the intention was for Diego to come off as a hopeless romantic. ONC wanted us to watch his crush on Spencer play out and be like, "Aw, Diego's such a cute little guy, he's so in love." But when I look back at their scenes together, I don't think that's how he comes off. Diego is gushing over Spencer even when Benji tells some gross lies about him, and whenever Diego tries to flirt with him, Spencer doesn't seem receptive to it at all, even uncomfortable at times. I don't think that Diego himself is a creep, and I don't think that his scenes are bad enough to the point where I get uncomfortable, but they're definitely awkward in a way that I don't like, and in a way that ONC definitely didn't intend. And if that was all there was to Diego, then he would be a shoo-in for second to last place, right after Logan almost single-handedly ruined the season Bell. But the crazy thing is, when Diego interacts with literally anyone other than Spencer, we get to see a version of him that is a lot more natural, a lot more down to earth, and so much more likable. In particular, even though it doesn't last too long, I really enjoy his dynamic with Hannah. Their dynamic is a relatively small part of episode 4, but even then, I think Diego's portrayal in those scenes is genuinely very good. And this is the version of the character that we get to see in basically every scene he's in after his elimination. He was honestly one of my favorites in episode 13 because they tackled his hangups on Spencer with maturity. They didn't milk it for the sake of drama, he's just sad that things went wrong and he's still upset about it, which I think is perfectly fair. And come the return challenge, which I was initially dreading partially because of Diego, he and Spencer are actually my favorite part of the episode. Because without Diego gushing over Spencer, they can speak to each other like normal people, and I think their argument genuinely works because it shows how neither of them really took each other's feelings into account when they were working together. And the episode ends with them realizing that. They don't get together, and arguably they're not even friends by the end of the episode. But they have enough respect between them to wish the other well, and I think that's a very nice way to end things. Now, this next part is just a rumor I heard, so I can't verify this for certain, but apparently, there might have been plans to give Diego more content. There may or may not have been a draft of the episode where Amelie and Diego returned to the game over Amelie and Marissa, which I do believe could be true. Because admittedly, Marissa does feel a bit out of place when compared to the rest of the merge cast, and because the gender ratio would be a lot less wonky if Diego came back. Would the season have been better if Diego was the one to return? I can't say. Based on how they used Marissa, I think Diego might have had more to offer, but at the same time, ONC probably would have milked the drama with him, Spencer, and Logan, and I don't know if I would have wanted to see that. Overall, I want to like Diego a lot more than I do. He has a lot of questionable moments, but separated from Spencer, I think he's a genuinely likable character who's earned his spot in the C tier. Now that I know the court of public opinion is probably not on my side, I'm gonna go ahead and rank another fan favorite in the bottom half. Keith Yeti, tell him who's next.
Isabelle.
And why is that?
Fuck that bitch. She ruined my ear. Also, her piece of stick hurts my eyes.
Oh no. Well, I guess since Keith Yeti told me to, I guess this is where Isabelle goes. Oh well, I tried. Thanks, little buddy. Here's a Twizzler.
Today is a good day to be easy.
Isabelle is such an anomaly to me because depending on the scene, she can either be absolutely hilarious or the second most boring character in the season, and I think pairing her with number 1 was probably intentional. I'm not joking, pretty much every aspect of Isabelle's character is something that I have mixed feelings about. So on one hand, I think that her highly religious attitude isn't nearly as well explored as it could have been. It's not a huge complaint, but for the 5th place finisher of the season, her relationship with God isn't too well defined, and I would have liked something a little bit more substantial than "I love Jesus." We have details of her backstory where she apparently snorted cocaine, which is awesome, but I wish we had a clearer before and after point. But on the other hand, Isabelle constantly talking about Jesus reminds me of this one object show meme that I really like, and that makes me laugh. So depending on my mood, all of Isabelle's Jesusisms are awesome, actually. I think that anytime Jade and Isabelle are on screen together, aside from the one time, they are incredibly boring, and I start to lose interest in whatever episode I'm watching. But then we get to episode 23, where Isabelle is glazing Jade so hard, and I think that's really funny. And then on top of all of that, her vocal performance, for the most part, is fairly reserved. But then you have shit like this moment in episode 16.
This is not slow and steady. Oh my god!
I know that Benji is supposed to be the comedic relief for the season, but high-key, if they committed to it, Isabelle could have done his job way better. I think as far as strategists go, I do think she can be entertaining. She's genuinely smart, and while a lot of her plays are based purely on logic, she's also prone to making mistakes, and sometimes votes emotionally. I know a lot of people in this fandom tend to mythologize the idea of the perfect strategist, but when you get someone who relies purely on logic, you're not really watching a person play a game like this, you're watching a robot. And Isabelle is assuredly not a robot. Ignoring everything that happens afterwards, her idol play in episode 19 is probably her best moment in the show. It's surprising, straightforward, and suitably dramatic. I can't in good confidence put it up as one of the best strategic moves in the genre, because if I try to take Isabelle too seriously, I start to like her a lot less. But as far as like Among Us goes, this is a really cool vent kill. What I don't like is what happens in the following episodes. And before I explain what that is, I'm gonna take a moment to address another problem I have with DC4 as a whole. I don't remember if it was Don Smith or JPEG who said this, but one of them expressed a lot of frustration with how overly nice the DC4 cast was, and how there was rarely any conflict between them, probably as a result of ONC overcorrecting due to backlash from All-Stars. Because this season does have interpersonal conflict. The problem is that most characters are too busy dealing with their own personal struggles, and that rarely factors into the interpersonal drama. That kind of thing makes all the conflict feel really toothless because none of the character relationships are as tight as they should be, and more pressingly, way too many of them are worried about being a bad person. Like, I can understand that for Jade because she almost let a dude drown, but Isabelle put and Marissa against each other purely out of spite, yet immediately backs down the next episode because she's worried about being wicked. What narrative potential does Isabelle gain by backing down like this? She goes from a potentially fun, campy antagonist to a slightly quirkier version of Jade. This decision does not tell us anything new about Isabelle's character. All it does is reveal to the audience that Marissa was just a stepping stone for Anastasia's development. I'm gonna give you all a hypothetical here because this is the easiest shit in the world to figure out. Instead of making Isabelle backpedal, wondering if she's a bad person, just have her be super unbothered by the last tribal. Imagine a scene after Marissa's elimination where Anastasia is getting really heated at Isabelle, yelling at her for what she did, and Isabelle, rather than blowing up, is just speaking to her very casually, even complimenting Anastasia on her challenge performance, before walking away. Then we get a confessional where Isabelle says something to the effect of,
God tells us to love thy neighbor, and I do, but I also love how she's totally spiraling right now.
And from there, she could have been written as not an outright villain, but definitely a schemer who intentionally tries to rage bait Anastasia, both to get a leg up strategically and also because, well, they don't like each other. I feel like that approach accomplishes a few things. First of all, it would make Jade's decision to flip on Isabelle at the final 5 a lot more satisfying, as Jade would have a front row seat to her #1 ally pushing Anastasia's buttons a little too much. and that could make Jade question her own game and how she wants to win the competition. It'd also give Zade more incentive to step in and help Anastasia, as she would definitely need someone to help her out given everything she's gone through, and I think Zade would be the guy to do it. And then he could fix episode 20's dog shit elimination into something that is both narratively satisfying and something that actually makes sense. Because in this timeline, Isabelle and Jade are voting him off instead of Logan and Anna. Anastasia would need to win the immunity instead of Jade, but come on, let's be honest. Jade being so close with Marissa and Natalia is about as believable as everyone in the jury being friends with Logan. By episode 22, Jade would come to the conclusion that if she made it to the final 3 with Isabelle would probably win the vote because her game has been a lot flashier and a lot more in your face, while Jade herself would probably be viewed as just her sidekick. I think that if Jade perceived their relationship like this, it would not only strengthen the relationship between Jade and Isabelle, but also make Isabelle's blind side make more sense, since in this timeline, she's actually a potential jury threat. I could go into more detail about this, but at this point I think you see the vision. Isabelle had an incredible amount of potential and easily could have been one of the most entertaining characters in the season, and a lot of people think that she is, which is awesome. I'm really happy for you if you think that. But for me personally, I feel like ONC didn't quite commit to the concept as much as they could have. But even then, I will gladly take a misguided character with some strong positives over anyone in the final 3. Low-key, even though I'm not her biggest fan, I think she should have been in Fans vs. Favorites, because honestly, who was asking for Anastasia again? Alright, enough throwing strays. Let's move on to B tier. B tier for this cast is a much higher honor than it was for the other seasons. The 11 characters who made it this high are all awesome, and I want to make that known right now. I think from here on out, the sections are probably going to get shorter since, aside from Diego, everyone I've already talked about made the merge. It's almost as if some important people left the show around the end of the pre-merge, and those people leaving caused a very notable decrease in the show's quality. Anyway, what can I say? I like the pre-mergers more, but if I had to choose one to start off the B tier, I think it'd be Amelie. I know I just implied that Isabelle was potential woman, but wow, Amelie Pierre is potential woman. I was really excited for Amelie when the season first started. Like, out of the entire cast, Amelie was the character I really had my eyes on, and I was really curious to see what they'd do with her. I was imagining a self-confident, self-reliant woman who would overcome everyone's initial perceptions of her and dazzle us all with her unfathomable aura. She was definitely the character from the Red Team who stood out the most to me, and watching her in those first 3 episodes seemed to hint at some big things. And then she got booted off second, and I won't lie, at the time I was disappointed. It did feel like a bit of a wasted opportunity, but obviously come episode 16, Amelie would be one of 2 returnees to rejoin the competition. By this point, episode 13 had happened, and while I did like Amelie in that episode, I felt that several other characters shined a lot more. So I was rooting for either Ted or Alessio to rejoin, and my excitement for Amelie quietly fizzled out. But that was then, and this is now. And with the benefit of hindsight, we can accurately gauge how well Amelie works as a returnee. I can absolutely see why ONC wanted to bring Amelie back. I think she had a fun personality, enough connections with the merge cast to start some interesting dynamics, and a lot of potential to be made good on. But while she is likable enough to warrant a return, based on what they did with her in the merge, I don't think she provided anything narratively significant to the story of DC4. Say whatever you want about Connor's return in Season 3, but you can't tell me that it wasn't majorly important for the season. The game really shook up once Connor came back. A lot of the plot beats that were set up for him in the pre-merge were expanded upon once he rejoined, and a lot of new plotlines started to spark up with him around. I still don't like how his first elimination played out, but admittedly it does make his comeback story a little stronger. Amelie doesn't really provide for her season the same way that Connor does for his, and she doesn't necessarily have to. Not every returnee has to become a main character, sometimes being support is fine. My issue is that Amelie's role in the season post-rejoin is almost exclusively to support Hannah and her plotline, which is something that I think someone else in the final 8 could have done just fine. Objectively speaking, Logan would have been the guy to fill that role considering how he and Hannah's bond becomes important later on, but whenever these two interact, bad things happen. So Honestly, given that he gets eliminated around the same time as Amelie, I think that Zade could have fit this role really well. It's not like ONC were doing anything else with him, might as well give him something, right? In my opinion, Hannah didn't need Amelie to come back into the game to continue her arc. Admittedly, Amelie and Hannah's early friendship does have some emotional moments that only work as well as they do because of how close they were in the pre-merge. But I feel like Amelie should have had something else going for her by this point. I mean, she tries to befriend Natalia before she immediately gets eliminated, and she did blackmail Logan that one time, but that didn't really go anywhere either. I should clarify though, I don't think that Amelie returning is bad writing. I think that there were better options and more interesting ways to fill her role, but I still like her. She's in the B tier for a reason. Amelie spent most of the merge coasting off of vibes, but I like those vibes, and I'm glad that I got to see more of her after her initial elimination. I enjoy Amelie more than 4 of the 5 characters who outplaced her, and by process of elimination, you can pretty easily figure out who's left. I just think that what she provides to the season, aka Hannah's development, could have been handled a lot better, because I do think there are a few sour spots worth talking about. Amelie's message is so heavy-handed.
Is it just me, or is Hannah suddenly acting so cruel? It's like looking in a mirror, like how I was before.
It feels like half the time she and Hannah interact, she's just there to lecture her. Hannah, why are you being so mean? Why didn't you let me win immunity like you promised? What would your mother think of you acting this way? That last one especially. Oh no, ma'am. Let's dissect that for a bit, shall we? So, rather than try to comfort a friend of yours who is clearly not doing well mentally and hasn't for a while now, Amelie decides that Hannah's treacherous villainy has gone too far and asks if her mom would be proud of her behavior on the show. And I guess we're meant to agree with her on that, but like, what the fuck? She's saying all this because Hannah left her behind in a challenge. And yeah, I know that Hannah promised to let Amelie win the next immunity challenge, but like, I feel like that promise being broken isn't severe enough to warrant a response like, Hannah, you betrayed our promise. Your dead mom would be so disappointed in you. If I was in Hannah's position and someone said that to me, that friendship is over and their ass is on the ground. But hey, having a dead mom is one thing, but it could have been worse. She could have placed bronze at the Olympics. I'm delving into Hannah territory now, so I think I'm gonna save the rest of my thoughts for her section. But overall, I like Amelie. I'm glad I got to see more of her, but she definitely could have been better, and that's all I have to say.
She's an old money bitch.
I couldn't think of a way to introduce this next character, so Linda Anderson. Now, I wish I could tell you that Linda made it to the top 10 purely based on what she does in the show, but if I told you that, then I would be a liar. So, for context, the artist behind this lovely redesign and my personal friend CamiraZone has been standing Linda basically since she was introduced. She has made countless jokes and memes about Linda, often in a very funny Minnesotan accent, and you know what? It rubbed off on me. Any character who can bring my friend that much amount of joy has my respect. I don't personally have very strong feelings towards Linda, I just think she's neat. I really like her accent, I think it's very funny, and it makes otherwise relatively normal dialogue sound hilarious. Initially, I predicted that Linda was going to be a red herring main antagonist who would end up as the first boot, and you know, I was a little bit right. I love that Linda is initially set up as a schemer who's going to tear apart the blue team, but after a few episodes, it becomes clear that she's just really goofy. I do like her relationship with Marissa. I just liked it the most when Linda voted her out. Like, I don't know how to explain this. When Isabelle got rid of Marissa, it was kinda hype, but when Linda did it, I think the only way I can describe it is that she was aura farming. I can't get over this fuck-ass little dance she does when she gloats to Anastasia. It's so silly looking, and yet it's exactly what an out-of-touch white woman would do to try to look cool. Honestly, why is Benji even here? Linda is probably the most quotable character from the entire season. I cannot tell you how many of her quotes have become vocal stems in my friend group. Logan's a boy, Anastasia's a girl. How did your daughter adapt? Where were you on September 11th? But beyond her surface level humor, there is actually an interesting character here. I feel like when episode 4 first came out and Linda made some insensitive comments about Richard's home life, a lot of people had a very strong knee-jerk reaction and started hating on her because she was being homophobic. And Yeah, she kinda was a little bit, but it is so blatantly obvious that those comments came from a place of ignorance and not maliciousness. Take it from someone who grew up conservative, growing up in that environment really fucks with your worldview. I had an easier time getting out of that mindset because I'm 21 and I grew up on the internet, but for a little while I was like genuinely believing some messed up stuff. And for an older woman like Linda who grew up in rural Minnesota, she likely grew up in an environment where these conservative values were the norm, and she probably didn't have many opportunities to break away from that. Not all conservatives are on the same level as throat goat Charlie Kirk. Some of them are genuinely misguided and are still good people despite their troubling opinions. Yes, Linda's comments towards Richard were insensitive, but I feel like that really bolsters their friendship later down the line, because it shows how two people from different walks of life can still find common ground and mend those bridges. Linda is not an oppressive homophobe, she's a victim of the cishet patriarchy, and I feel like a lot of people realize that now, but back then Linda was getting a lot of hate, and I think that was kinda lame. Because when you think about it, a lot of this ties into Linda's overall storyline. She came to the competition thinking that she was going to be a strategic juggernaut because she watched a lot of reality TV, only for her to realize upon joining Disventure camp that she's really out of touch with most of the cast. She has trouble connecting with most of the younger people. Ted was taken from her, and from me, far too soon, and it's only when she mends bridges with Richard does she find someone to confide in. I especially like how she's quick to mock and chastise Anastasia throughout the competition, but when the game ends and she's been eliminated, Linda takes the time to clarify that she actually respects her, happy to see a strong, assertive young woman fighting to win. Not that it absolutely needed to happen, but I can't help but wonder what would have happened if Linda had stayed longer and these two got to interact further. I could easily see a scenario where Anastasia starts losing hope as the stress of the game takes a toll on her, and Linda puts aside their differences to encourage her. Imagine a scenario where Anastasia confides in Linda about how she was chased out of Russia, and Linda assures her that she made the right decision, that she shouldn't let other people decide how they should live, highlighting how Anastasia is still young and she has so many more opportunities to explore. I don't know, I think something like that could have been very heartwarming, and also it would have led to a very strong feminist message, which I think we could always use more of. Anyway, TLDR, Linda Anderson is awesome, and if you don't agree, then low-key you probably hate women. That was a joke, to clarify. Don't get mad at me. Don't get mad at me. I saw you typing something out. Stop that.
Welcome to the underground. How was the fall?
My favorite thing about Tristan is that despite being the fifth boot, they are easily the most popular character in the cast, with their only competition being their lame-ass boyfriend. And what makes that so funny is that now that we know that the VA did most of the writing for Tristan, Tristan is probably the character that Jared had the least input into creating. And they are the fan favorite of this cast, well liked beyond any of the characters that Jared wanted us to like, which I think is really funny.
Why are you being so mean to Jared?
Rage baiting is a two-way street, Keith Yeti. If he can do it, then so can I. Anyway, Tristan. I like them a lot. They're a wholesome, non-binary, silly little guy, and something about that activates specific neurons in my brain that bring me joy. Tristan is wholesome in such a way that it gives me faith that humanity may one day turn out okay. And I know some people think characters like this are boring, and honestly, Tristan very easily could have turned out this way, if not for the writing and vocal performance of one Kai Hauser. Tristan is a very authentic trans character, and the level of nuance required to write that is something that only a trans person can pull off. Now, generally speaking, I do appreciate how some pieces of media don't draw explicit attention to the identities of their trans characters. I like how trans people can just exist in media now, at least in the indie sphere, beyond their labels. But I really do like how Tristan's identity, while not being the defining aspect of their character, is still relevant and important to who they are, which I think is the right call, because if you're a trans man or a trans woman, you can eventually reach a state of passing, where you can present yourself as masculine or feminine, and the people around you will perceive you as the gender that you identify as. Some trans people can do this very easily, but for people like me who have voices as deep as the Marianas Trench, it's a little bit harder. But it's really hard to pass as non-binary because a lot of people still don't know that there are more options than just man and woman. But that's not always a result of people being malicious. Sometimes those people are like Zade and just need a bit of guidance before they get it. And while Tristan has a lot of sweet scenes with Ivy that pertain to their identity, I think they're at their best when they interact with Benji. Now, could Tringy have worked if Tristan was cisgender? Sure, but it would have been way more boring, and I think that with Tristan being non-binary, there is another layer to this relationship that I really like. This is just my personal read on Tristan, so don't take this as fact, but Tristan is both non-binary and into goth culture, two groups that have historically been othered and outcasted by society. When Hannah asks them if they like Ivy or Zade, Tristan tells them that they're both too normal for their tastes. I suspect that Tristan may be grappling with some internalized transphobia. Dating as a trans person is really hard. Most people have sexual preferences that lie within conventional gender binaries, and sometimes those who don't can be weird about it. I would know, I've been on the receiving end of that. Tristan is a very outgoing person, but I imagine seeing two of their closest friends getting together was very hard for them. Not because they wanted either Zade or Ivy, but because they wanted the kind of connection that they had together. And I imagine that growing up in the abusive environment that they did, Tristan was told to believe that they didn't deserve that kind of relationship because of who they were. But Benji is also an outcast. He's clumsy, he says dumb things, he has interests that other people make fun of him for, and no one in the cast respected him for most of his run in the season. Which is why I think Tringy works so well as a couple. They really understand and get each other in a way that no one else in the cast does. Benji being an outsider is a little more self-explanatory, but even though people in the cast like Tristan, and in Zade and Ivy's case, genuinely treasure them as a friend, those types of relationships aren't quite the same as a relationship with your special person. I adore all of my friends, and I honestly view them as family, but none of them fully understand me the way that my girlfriend does. And I think that same sentiment applies to Benji and Tristan. Benji makes Tristan feel comfortable in their own skin and with their own identity. And that's so fucking sweet, you guys. This relationship is so cute and genuinely so enjoyable that I'm honestly surprised it came from Disventure Camp. Tom Jake has nothing on Tringy, much less any of Spencer's relationships. Ugh. Jokes aside, I really appreciate that a non-binary person like Tristan is allowed to have a romantic partner, and they aren't just a gimmick character made to be silly. As much as I love this plotline though, Tristan is only 8th on this list for a reason. The story I just described to you only takes root in a few episodes, and some of what I mentioned is just my own headcanon. It's not that Tristan did anything wrong, it's just that for someone who went out 5th, most of the cast had a lot more time to shine than they did. Even though, if you're keeping track, 2 characters that got eliminated before Tristan are still higher up on the list, but we can ignore that for now. In a hypothetical scenario where Tringy was the main relationship of the season, and we got to see this relationship play out with the same writing quality they already had, I'd probably be talking about Benji right now, and Tristan would be even higher on the list. But I guess non-binary people just don't make for good thumbnails. No time to focus on them, we gotta give all that extra screen time to fucking Mathlete! I hesitate to say that Tristan was wasted. I just think that Kai's influence made Tristan a significantly better character than they were ever intended to be. So, thank you for all of your work, Kai. From one trans person to another, I really appreciate everything you put into Tristan's story.
I just love Latinas, Sonic.
So, it wasn't until I got to this point in the recording that I realized how many strays I had been throwing at Jade and Anastasia, and how many strays I will continue to throw at them as I read the rest of this script. So I'm sorry if you're a fan of those characters and it seems like I'm unfairly picking on them, but if the Logan fans can handle everything that's been thrown his way, you can handle this. No one's gonna like what I have to say here, but you know what? My video, my rules. Can you imagine the timeline where everything is the same except Natalia and Jade swap places? Because I can, and I prefer it to this. Because in my personal opinion, I think that Natalia has a better friendship with Isabelle, more of a dynamic with Logan, a more interesting personality, and dare I say it, more exciting strategic gameplay. Aside from the one time, but we'll get into that. Fun fact, I actually auditioned for Natalia when the casting call went up, and it was so dog shit that I had to delete it later. Sometimes I think about how Jace Hansen had to hear that audition, and that fact genuinely keeps me up at night. Thankfully, I've gotten better since then. But as for Natalia, I actually had to take a few days off from writing the script because I was genuinely at a loss on how to talk about her. It's kind of hard to describe Natalia, you just kinda have to watch the season and experience her firsthand. But as crazy as it sounds, I know that a lot of you actually did not watch the season, so I will try my best to explain anyway. I really like Natalia, and I think she has all the makings of a great character in this format. She's got a distinguished, funny personality, she has some degree of strategy, and she's a trans woman, my personal favorite demographic of human being. I think the best way to describe Natalia is a character made in a lab specifically to cater to the desires of Stan Twitter, and miraculously that character is actually very likable. I already briefly talked about her during previous segments, so I'll try my best to give you a rundown. Natalia, in my mind, is a low-key strategist, not in the sense that her gameplay puts her under the radar, but because she's able to make strategic game moves and decisions without turning into a game bot. I think it's interesting how, by Natalia's own admission, her strategy mostly revolves around instinct. I think that within the Survivor-style TV show community, or whatever you want to call it, people think that every game move is either logical or emotional, and I think Natalia does a good job of showing the middle. You could easily rationalize her negative first impression of Spencer because, let's be honest, the guy kind of gives off supervillain energy. But while in her case it was probably the right play to get rid of Spencer, let's not kid ourselves, she voted him because she didn't like him, and honestly I enjoy that. Natalia portrays herself as a master social player and logician, and I genuinely think she is really good at those parts of the game, but her instinct doesn't always lead her to the best decisions, and sometimes she gets herself into trouble. So objectively speaking, as a strategist, she's not as successful as Jade or Anastasia, but I think she's a lot more entertaining than both of them. The other two both have things about them that make me question if they're really as smart as the narrative wants me to believe they are, but Natalia managed to avoid all of those pitfalls. That is, until her elimination episode. I stand by that Zade has the worst elimination of the season, but Natalia is a very close second because of how much the narrative has to do backflips in order to try to make it make sense. Most of it hinges on Natalia losing favor with the others because she brought Spencer in for the vote discussion, which why the fuck did she do that? I can buy that maybe Natalia would want to knock off Anastasia over Spencer because she views her as the bigger threat, but I don't buy that she would ever give Spencer the time of day. Girly pop, you have enough people with or without him. There's nothing that either Anastasia or Spencer could do to stop you. But following that, we get several scenes with Zade and Anastasia and Spencer where they all work together against Natalia, and all of it feels so forced. It's so obvious to me that they just needed an excuse to keep Spencer another episode and just didn't care about writing Natalia anymore. Don't get me wrong, I like Spencer. I give the guy a lot more credit than most people in the fandom are willing to. But given how the narrative is presented to us, episode 17 absolutely should have been his time to go. And if they really needed to keep him around past that, I feel like they should have done a better job setting up another option. Honestly, I think it would have worked better if episodes 17 and 18 were swapped, because I think this episode genuinely has great setup for Spencer's elimination. And from there, you can make the auction challenge mostly center around Natalia. There's a variety of things that she could do to get people to want to target her, but I think giving her a focal episode to be the main character before her elimination is the way to go. But as is, I think her elimination was really shoddy, and I hate that because I love Natalia's personality. She has some questionable moments, sure, especially when she's paired with Logan, but for the most part, whenever Natalia appeared on screen, I was happy. For some reason, talking about Natalia was the most difficult of any character so far, not because she doesn't have enough content, but because she's relatively straightforward in how she's written. A lot of these characters take themselves way too seriously. Natalia doesn't. She knows how to have fun, and she knows when to pump the brakes a little bit and be more serious. Even when she's not roasting Spencer, she has that little layer of sass and charisma in all of her interactions, and that's a big part of what makes Natalia, Natalia. There is a story where Natalia makes the final two of DC4, and I swear it would be so easy to write because Natalia is everything you need in a finalist. Charming, funny, game-savvy, emotional, absolutely gorgeous, oh my god, and most importantly, she has a likable personality. Which I didn't think would be such a big point in her favor, but oh my god. So yeah, Natalia is great. In Season 4. Maybe I'd like her better in Season 5 if she stopped talking about Tom's ass.
All my friends are dead. Push me to the edge.
If it wasn't already clear, I think that the final 6 of this season leaves something to be desired. By this point, most of my favorite characters had been eliminated, and I didn't think this group of 6 had enough chemistry to make up for that. But if you've been keeping track, I've only talked about 5 of them so far, and that's because one of them actually stands out as someone that I really like. I like Hannah for the same reasons that I like Zoe, Priya, sometimes Sky, and Core and Fire Emblem, and it's because I'm kind of a basic bitch. And if you're gonna try to convince me that no, Hannah's way more complex than those characters, I appreciate your enthusiasm, but you gotta stop lying to yourself. Hannah Roxas is a bisexual party girl with a dead mom. That short sentence summarizes every relevant detail about her character. Does that automatically make her shallow or poorly written? Fuck no. Relatively simple concepts like Hannah's can work really well if the execution is there, and with Hannah, I think it is. I'm running out of synonyms to describe this cast, so take it from me when I say that pre-merge Hannah is generally just very pleasant and fun to watch. Unlike someone like, say, Sarah from Reality Resort, I think Hannah fills the role of the every woman very well because she's easy to root for and interesting to watch. And while I could go on about how charming she is, let's be honest, you don't care about that. You want to hear about Dead Mom Girl.
Actually, I want to hear about her and Benji.
I talked about them during Benji's section.
For like 5 seconds. Come on, give Benji a break.
Okay, fine. I like how they're positioned as the 2 outsiders on the red team after Amelie's elimination, and I like how both of them have different ideas on how they should work with Jade. Now, I am aware that Benji and Hannah is a relatively popular ship in the fandom. In fact, I know the guys on Voice Under the Covers are really big Hanji shippers. And all the power to you if Hanji's your thing. But I personally don't see it. I feel like Hannah just doesn't understand Benji like that, you know? Like, if Benji told Hannah that he was going to a cosplay convention, she'd probably be like, oh yeah, good for you, Benji, have fun. Whereas Tristan would already be working on a matching cosplay outfit. They both clearly care for Benji a lot, but Tristan gets him. And Hannah gets Logan, who I guess I'll have to talk about, but first, Dead Mom. All of this starts with Dead Mom. Hannah's dead mom was a plot point brought up in the pre-merge as an unfortunate detail in her backstory, and at a certain point in the merge, it becomes her entire storyline. Now, you can have an internal struggle be the defining conflict for a character like Hannah, but at least in the total drama format, I think it might be better to explore that conflict with some of the other characters. The problem is that Hannah's interaction partners really let her down. Benji was good while he lasted, but he was long gone by the time that Hannah really started to grapple with her mom's death. Amelie was brought back entirely to support Hannah, and she does an okay job, but the less said about Logan 30acre, the better. Just thinking out loud here, how come she and Zade never had a conversation about this? Zade and Hannah have had beef with each other since the pre-merge, both voting out each other's closest allies. Zade is also constantly stated to have a very strong connection with his mom, and his main motivation to win Disventure Camp is to support her. Really feels like Zade should have had that conversation with her in episode 20, but in fairness, Logan being there instead isn't the only problem. For some reason, whenever Hannah is having a breakdown, the quality of the dialogue gets really bad, and at first this really bothered me, but looking back, I think a lot of these scenes are really funny. I cannot count the amount of times my friends have quoted angsty Hannah. She has some of the best lines in the season.
That's the difference between us. You knew what you were signing up for. Me? I didn't. All I knew was that it's a game. And here I thought games were supposed to be fun.
Oh, God bless Maganda Marie. Hannah would not be half the character she is now without her voice. So, objectively speaking, I don't think Hannah's dead mom storyline is all that good, but I still really like it for reasons that definitely weren't intended. I genuinely think Maganda does an excellent job selling how grief-stricken and mentally screwed Hannah is, but none of the other characters around Hannah are really pulling their weight, unfortunate as that is to say. I do like how her story ends on a positive note, with her allowing herself to get lost in the moment and have fun despite all the grief she's going through. I think there's genuinely something to that, and I like seeing Hannah sorta come to terms with her emotions. I do think that there was more story that could have been told with Hannah, and she probably should have made it into season 5 over Anastasia, but we're far past the point where anything can be done about that. Anyway, I should probably mention Pool Party real quick, because low-key, basically everyone I know really does not like Pool Party, but I don't hate it. I do enjoy their scenes together in the last 3 episodes, but in fairness, that is almost entirely due to the vocal performances and not the writing. Because from what I can tell, Tony and Maganda intentionally made their scenes a lot more flirtatious than was originally in the script, and Jared adamantly denied that the two had any feelings for each other whatsoever on Twitter. Which, if you think about it, obviously that's the case. Did any of you seriously think that Logan kissing a girl was gonna make OddNations any money? Get with the program, this is the Yaoi series. Overall, as a character who made it to the late merge of season 4, Hannah came out surprisingly likable. I think most of what they try to do with her really should not work, but I feel like due to her natural charisma, I think she gets away with it. Sometimes when you like a character enough, you're willing to excuse a lot of the flaws that come with their character and their writing. And in my case, Hannah isn't even the only example of that.
If you do the cooking by the book, then you'll have a
Break it down, bitch! Let me see you back it up!
Believe me, I really wanted to put Zade higher than 5th, but good vibes can only bring you so far, and this high up on the list, I have to face the music. Not a single person writing for this season gave even an ounce of a fuck about Zade. He spends the entire pre-merge playing second fiddle to Ivy until she gets eliminated. Then he plays second fiddle to Anastasia until they stop talking for a bit. And then he plays second fiddle to Logan for like 3 episodes before his elimination, which we have already covered in depth. Like, he's got a big role in episode 20 because he gets eliminated there, which is better than Natalia got, I suppose. And then he did have a compelling storyline in episode 23 with Benji and Tristan, but other than those 2 times, when did this dude ever get to be important? He matters so little to the overall narrative that I genuinely would have preferred if he had gone earlier. Because I spent every episode after Ivy's elimination excitedly waiting to see what they were gonna do with Zade, and every episode I was disappointed because nothing happened with him. And it seriously baffles me that they would do this. Like, did you guys not learn from Beta Rosa Maria? Why is this happening again? They wrote Zade like they were running on 10% battery, which is a damn shame because whenever he does get content, he actually shows a lot of promise. I'm not gonna act like Zade is a super deep character with an incredibly complex personality. He's not. No one in this show has that and none of them ever will. But he's a chill, likable dude. He's sort of the male equivalent of Hannah in that way, so I think it's really interesting that they don't get along that well despite their similarities. As I said in the previous segment, something really could have happened there. But despite his mostly calm demeanor, Zade does have a bit of a fiery temper. In particular, he places a lot of emphasis on loyalty, so when one of his allies ends up betraying him, he gets appropriately upset. You can call him salty all you want. I personally think he was justified in all of those instances. That's arguably his biggest character flaw. The fact that he allows himself to get too close with his allies, not really considering that they may have selfish intentions that don't align with his own. His defining character trait is his big heart, and for that reason, I think he comes off as a more well-rounded version of DJ. DJ is definitely funnier, but Zade feels like a more realized version of what DJ could have been if he was taken more seriously. Not fully realized, mind you, this is still the Logan and Anastasia show, lest you forget, but there's a good character here. And to highlight that, I want to quickly bring up the exit interviews. You remember the exit interviews, right? I don't think I ever mentioned them in any of my episode reviews, and the reason for that is quite simple. I did not watch them. I know they did a better job fleshing out the characters, and there's a lot more detail there. I didn't care, and low-key, I still don't. Didn't watch them. But I did watch Zade's because I heard from some friends that apparently he really popped off at Logan. And come to find out, oh my god, he sure did.
This motherfucker! I knew something was up with him when he was acting so shady with Marissa and Anastasia during that clown challenge. Why is it that people that boast how much they care about their friends always end up being faker than a tofu burger?
Ugh, feeling a bit bitter?
Why wouldn't I be? All it takes is a 10-minute conversation with Anastasia, and you'll be talking with Isabelle instead of me. Blindly believing the bullshit Logan spouts after all the shady tactics he pulled is insane to me.
You see, that rage is real, which makes me think that this was 100% Nathan's take on Zade, because no way would Jared or the proofreaders allow anyone to get that angry at their precious golden boy. I know that most discussion about Logan is very negative because most of us don't like the guy, but this was probably the first time post-merge that anyone gave Logan any pushback on any of his decisions in universe. And if I had seen this video right after episode 20, oh my god, that would have been so refreshing. And believe it or not, it wouldn't have stopped there. Nathan Timmons, Zade's VA, left a comment on one of my videos where they mentioned that they recorded some lines for the episode 23 bonfire where Zade really went in on Logan, calling him out for his actions and bringing him down a peg. But ultimately, those lines didn't make the cut, and I think that's a real shame. The only reason I can possibly think to prevent Zade from doing that is if ONC really wanted to convince the audience that Logan is such a good guy and you guys should totally support him. Please don't cancel your Patreon subscriptions if he wins. Please, guys. Fortunately for Zade, he does actually have some content, mostly involving the Vibe Tribe. I like the sibling dynamic that he has with Tristan, both because it's very wholesome and because it provides a narrative parallel to Hannah and Benji. I think that's a really nice touch. He and Benji's strange relationship is maybe not always super well written, but you know, it's something. And obviously, if you've been following my channel, I think that he and Ivy have a very sweet relationship. I don't have a complex reason for why I like them so much, I just think they're cute and have a lot of natural chemistry. There is a deeper conversation to be had regarding how Disventure Camp writes relationships, but Spencer has been waiting his turn very patiently, so we'll talk about that when we get to him. As for Zade, I know most of the fandom doesn't really care for him, and I think that's a shame, because I happen to really like what he brings to the table. And even though a lot of people might not see him the same way, I'm glad that I get to use my platform to gas him up.
I will do anything for art.
Okay, by this point, most of you have narrowed down who's left. The top 4 is some combination of Spencer, Ivy, Alessio, and Ted Gordon. And before you ask, yes, I am aware that I have weird taste. I highly doubt that most people would even consider putting the 2 last place finishers even close to the top 4. But are they good enough to make the top 3? I would say that Ted is, but Alessio probably is not. I put Alessio this high on the list knowing full well that he is mostly perceived as a meme, and I don't care, I think he's really well written actually. I think there's an argument to be made that Alessio is somehow a perfect first boot. He's never going to reach the same heights as my goat Caleb because no one is, but think about everything that Alessio does during his short time competing in Disventure Camp. He crushes a snail, fucks off from team bonding, paints himself as a sad clown, and then gets absolutely destroyed in the second challenge. Then, Logan, by painting a little orange mustache on his painting, gives Alessio the biggest brain blast of his life, curing his artist block, his depression, his impotence probably, and gives him a reason to keep going. And then he gets voted out because that is all he needed to do. The fact that Alessio's arc was much better written and better paced than anyone else's from the final 6 is honestly really sad. Much like a sad clown that looks like this. Now, you might think to write him off as a silly joke character by this point, and yeah, for the most part he is played for comedy. But look at him in episodes 13 and 16 and you might notice something under the surface. Alessio struggles a lot with personal fulfillment. While he did overcome his artist's block, it didn't make him happy for very long. Alessio in episode 13 is lamenting the mistakes that got him eliminated. He's not happy with how the game went and he's not happy with any of his artistic accomplishments. We get to see his incredible skill with the guitar, and Ted wastes no time complimenting his abilities, but Alessio barely gives his words any thought. It's not until the end of the episode when Alessio's mood starts to pick up. Surrounded by the rest of the island crew, he musters up the nerve to play a song on the guitar, which, side note, I really like. Mackenzie McClure has a very nice singing voice, and if Alessio had made it to the singing challenge, I think he would have killed it. When I watched the episode initially, Alessio was easily the character that stood out the most to me, and I was positive that he was gonna return. Come to find out, no, he wasn't even a consideration. I guess Marissa and Amelie were just so important to the story they were trying to tell. I think Alessio is good in the comeback challenge, but there's this one scene with him and Natalia that really stands out to me, and oddly enough, it was one that got cut from the episode. There's a bonus scene on the YouTube channel that shows Alessio lamenting his performance on the show, with Natalia taking the time to comfort him. The two bond over their shared tattoos, and they hug. It's nothing mind-blowing, and admittedly my description doesn't fully replicate the feeling of the scene, but I would highly recommend you watch it because I think it's genuinely very nice. I think it goes to show that Alessio still feels like he has a lot to prove, both as a contestant on Disventure Camp and as an artist. And as a creative myself, I think that's very relatable. I've been in that mindset before, where you feel like you have to come out with something spectacular or you're not doing well enough. That's a storyline that I would have loved to see explored in greater detail, but Alessio's not in Fans vs. Favorites, and we don't know when or if he's coming back, so chances are we may never see this story through. And this to me is the big smoking gun that makes me believe that Season 5 was originally going to be Season 4 rematch. Well, that and Linda's remark in the final episode about getting another chance. Like, we got Fans vs. Favorites by accident, this was not the plan. Still, even if we never get to see Alessio again, I really appreciate him for what he was, and as far as first boots go, you can't do much better. Aside from Caleb, of course.
Grave Skull, what do? Dig to anybody and dig underneath to any talent underneath a body. Okay, this is your movement ability, that's very good. Relentless that. At the end of each transpawn, a zombie kitten familiar onto a random tile. That's also very funny. Oh hey,
that'll be in the video.
Take it to the wall of flesh in the caves. Okay, so we're going back into the wall of flesh. I mean, if you talk, you will be.
That sounds kind of funny.
Okay, so as it so happens, my microphone was muted, but both of you two were okay. Do you think that would be good enough, or do you want to say some more funny things?
I think that's good enough, personally.
You're right. This next section will be about the final character in the A tier, and by the time I'm done, this script might be longer than the one for All Stars, which already terrifies me. Thankfully, the other two are pretty simple characters, all things considered, so let's tackle the last big hurdle in this cast. Spencer Lawrence gets a taste of bronze without even having to bang Logan. Good for him. If you had told me that Spencer would have ended up as one of the season's best characters back in November 2024, oh my god, I would have been very skeptical. Because to say that Spencer left a bad first impression would be underselling it quite a bit, and that's for a variety of reasons, but let's start with Disventure. Very early on in the season, it did seem like Spencer and Diego were going to be another MLM couple that dominated the narrative, and I wasn't about that. The reason I wasn't about that is not as simple as I hate yaoi. I don't, I promise. I just hate the way that Disventure Camp went about writing them. Initially, I was put off by Dispenser because seasons 1 and 2 were both heavily defined by their MLM couples. Tom Jake was the biggest plotline of season 1, and Jaden was the biggest plotline of season 2. And I think both of them were written fine, I just didn't think they were written all that differently. Let's do a quick exercise. Try to guess which relationship I'm describing here. Two gay men hit it off very early in the competition, and they really start to bond and care for each other, but, as it so happens, the taller, buffer man is secretly hiding something from his twink partner. A very mean woman comes between the two and reveals the secret to the twink, and once he learns of this, he gets incredibly upset and completely turns on the other guy, until they eventually make up in the finale and most everything is okay. Yeah, it's both of them, and I don't even dislike either couple in their debut season. I genuinely like the story that both of these couples went through. I just didn't think that Disventure Camp needed to tell that story for a third time. By season 4, I wanted something different. And credit where it's due, they did do something different with Dispenser. These two never had the same connection that Tom, Jake, or Jaden had, so them not getting together makes total sense, and I thought it was a welcome change. Less so with Mathlete, which I don't like. I don't mean to turn Spencer's section into a PSA about how ONC writes MLM couples, but I promise I'm going somewhere with this. Spencer and Logan become a pair basically the moment Spencer joins the blue team, and in the following episodes we get a lot of content focused solely on the two of them. Spencer is a big part of Logan's bisexual awakening. They lock lips on 2 separate occasions, one of which was put into the thumbnail of the episode. The episode 16 thumbnail shows Spencer and Diego crying together while Logan leers at them, seeming quite jealous, even though nothing like this happens in the episode. Logan and Spencer have a similar falling out to both Tom, Jake, and Jaden, which by itself would be fine, but combined with everything else I've said, it feels like Mathlete was treading the same ground. All of this for Logan to later be like, oh yeah, I don't think I'm ready for that, let's just be friends. Which, narratively, I think I prefer, because unlike Tom, Jake, and Jaden, Mathlete has terrible chemistry, and I think this is a better result for both characters. But it's also clickbait. A lot of people were really upset about how Dispenser and Mathlete ended up, and Jared responded by saying, I forget exactly what he said, but it was something snarky and dismissive, you know how he is. And in most cases, I would be inclined to take his side if ONC didn't plaster these couples on every other thumbnail. The concepts of dispenser and mathlete aren't nothing, they are a marketing tactic based on the ideas of fictional relationships that ONC took advantage of. So when you tease these MLM relationships because you know it's going to get you more views, only for neither of those relationships to end up happening, I'm sorry, but that is queerbaiting. A lot of people have made the argument that thumbnails with gay imagery tends to get a lot more views, and that ONC has to do this or they'll lose a lot of viewers, but looking at the episodes, that doesn't seem to be true. Episodes 14 and 16 got about the same amount of views as some of the episodes released around that same time. The actual standout episodes of Season 4 are apparently 19 and 20, with the former having almost the same amount of views as Episode 5, which, hilariously enough, means that if ONC really wanted to maximize their thumbnails, Jade and Isabelle were their golden thumbnail couple, not Logan and Spencer. So in my mind, I don't like how Season 4 handled a lot of its MLM content, and Spencer just so happened to be in the center of that. So for a long time, I really didn't like him for that reason. I mean, aside from the queerbaiting, he had an absurd amount of plot armor. I don't think it ever became unbearable until episode 17, but God, man, if you just look back at those previous episodes, it kind of feels like the narrative is bending over backwards to accommodate Spencer. Now at this point, you're probably asking yourselves, wow, Lexi, that's a lot of really bad things involving Spencer. Why the hell is he in the top 3? Well, that's easy. It's because Spencer is by far the most important character in the entire season. When the season was still releasing episodes, I spent so much time hating on this man, and when he was eliminated, I was happy. But in all that time, I never took a moment to think about what Spencer was actually doing for the narrative. Spencer was the biggest source of conflict in the season, and he had rivalries with several different characters. Jade, Logan, Hannah, Anastasia, Natalia, this guy served as an antagonist to all of them, and he gave them a clear person to work against. And I don't think it's a coincidence that not long after he left the show, everything started to fall apart. Episode 19 worked out okay because Isabelle was there to temporarily fill that role, but nobody's actually gonna argue that she was the merge antagonist, right? She was way too paranoid about being wicked for that. Spencer gave everyone an external threat to bounce off of, so when you take him away and you don't have anyone to fill his shoes, you have a problem. Hannah's main source of conflict becomes her dead mom. Jade's main source of conflict becomes, ooh, am I a bad person? Logan's main source of conflict becomes the water. These are not tangible forces that the characters can interact with. And while you could make an internal conflict like this work with enough setup, this all comes to a head during the last, 7 episodes. In an ensemble cast. So in practice, the final 7 of DC4 feels like one giant therapy circle, and I think that's lame as fuck. How do you make it not lame? Well, that's simple. Turn that internal conflict into a person. Take someone like Gwen, for example. She's a very grumpy, introverted woman who hates being on a show as vapid as Total Drama. She's paired up with Trent, a very positive, down-to-earth guy who isn't put off by her goth aesthetic and standoffish demeanor. On the surface, these two are very different characters, but these differences allow Gwen and Trent to better highlight each other's character traits. This is what we call a foil. Spencer is a foil for quite a few characters, but I think the character he works off the best is Jade. A big part of Jade's character is that she wants to be defined by her strategic gameplay, I think because she's afraid of being judged and afraid of what others will think of her. Pair that with Spencer, who also wants to be seen as a good strategist, but who hardly cares about what other people think of him as a person. By interacting with Spencer, Jade sees the person that she could become if she detaches herself too much from everyone else. Ergo, these two are foils and have a solid character relationship. I think they tried to do this with Isabelle as well, but I think her constant simping for Jade and all of the backpedaling done after her idol play really sours that connection. Spencer wasn't a main antagonist in the traditional sense, but he was the closest we had, and that is a very important role to fill in a season. I don't compliment All-Stars Rhea very often, but credit where it's due, she did make things happen. And while I think the last 7 episodes of DC4 are better than the last few episodes of DCAS, I think the character conflict is objectively better written written in the latter. Because during the merge of DC4, none of the conflict flows together. It's just individual personal conflict causing everyone to lash out and trauma dump on each other. And as I was watching those last few episodes, watching Hannah melt down for like the 8th time and Anastasia lashing out at people for the stupidest reasons, it finally dawned on me. I missed Spencer. Because looking back, when he's done right, he's a fun character to follow. I like how he antagonizes the other contestants, and I love how smug he gets whenever he thinks he has the upper hand. I think Hannah and Ivy hated him a little too much in the pre-merge relative to what he actually did, but I think that's just a byproduct of the writing staff having a little too many Jake-isms in their system. Spencer puts a lot of things into motion. Him betraying Diego starts the Hannah curse, him blindsiding Tristan sets off Ivy and leads her to sabotage the team. Pretty much all of Blue Team's drama post-team swap led right back to him, and that gave everyone a narrative push. You can dislike Spencer all you want, I know he's a very controversial character. But even if you hate his guts, you still have to admit that he was integral to most of the conflict that happened this season. Anastasia's the only person who comes close, but even then, Spencer caused so much drama on both teams, I feel like I have to reward that. All things considered, Spencer probably should be number 1. He provides a lot to the season, not always in a good way, but his strengths are vital to the season as a whole, and in many ways he kinda mirrors it. Spencer is flawed. There are a lot of things about him that I don't like, and he doesn't have as much bite as I would have wanted him to, but I still think he's enjoyable and a significant improvement over what we had before. I'm pretty sure this is the longest segment by a pretty wide margin, which I do think Spencer deserves, but I put 2 people over him for a reason. Let's tackle this goofy-ass top 2.
Life is like
poker.
Normally for these lists, I like to have an objective favorite and a personal favorite. Spencer is my objective favorite character of the season because I genuinely think he's the MVP when it comes to actually pushing the narrative. And first place is my personal favorite because I just love everything that they are about, but this time someone came between them. We're a few months removed from DC4's finale, and I've had plenty of time to reflect on the season as a whole. And having analyzed this season to bits, I can now confidently say that Ted Gordon is the biggest case of missed potential in the entire show. This man should not have been eliminated in episode 4 because he had everything going for him. Obviously he was funny. Even if I didn't love all of his jokes, the sheer existence of Ted Gordon and the power he exudes is something that cannot be ignored. Something else I've noticed from a lot of the fandoms I'm in is that when people start referring to certain characters by their full legal names, that is a sign that they have achieved mythic levels of aura. Do you even remember what Richard's last name was? I bet most of you don't, but you know Ted Gordon. Funny meme guy status is just one part of it though. Despite his goofiness, Ted clearly has strategic merit. He and Linda are positioned as the 2 main conflict causers on Blue Team near the start of the season, and these interactions tell us a lot about Ted's character. We get to see how he's willing to go against the gendered lines and conspire with Linda in order to get some more leverage in the game, but we also get to see him genuinely bonding with Linda when they talk about their kids and how hard it's been to raise them. And I really like that scene. I think Linda and Ted have a lot of really good chemistry that I wish we got to see more of. And just from these first 4 episodes, I think Ted has a more definitive character identity than anyone in the final 3, and that is embarrassing. A smarmy, middle-aged poker player is a character concept that I didn't expect ONC to go for, but I think they pulled it off very well with Ted. But, you know, unfortunately, we already know how this story ends. Back when I first covered episode 4, I said that I was okay with Ted being an early boot if everyone else, namely Richard, could pull their weight and prove that they deserved to stay. But now that I have the benefit of hindsight, yeah, no, Richard probably should have gone there instead. I like the guy, I really do, and there are some things he does better than Ted, but his role is a lot less necessary than a lot of other characters that he's paired with. Meanwhile, if Ted had returned to the game, and I promise I'm not being hyperbolic when I say this, I think he could have radically improved the overall story of DC4, especially during the merge. It might be bold of me to say this, but I think that Ted needed to return to the game more than anyone else. We've already been over how DC4 lacks a true main antagonist, and while Spencer sort of filled this role for a while, he only got 9th place. So why not let Ted Gordon return to the game and be that guy? I know that a lot of us like Amelie, but let's not pretend that her return was more important than it was. To show you that, I'm gonna give you a quick hypothetical where Ted replaces her. I think that Ted, theoretically, could have had an interesting antagonistic relationship with everyone in the Final Four. Logan would be obvious, since Ted would still be bitter from his betrayal, so upon coming back, he'd do everything in his power to sabotage Logan's chances and get him voted out. This would give Logan some actual consequences for his actions and force him to try harder to navigate the game. I imagine he's not the biggest fan of Anastasia either, so what if he sought to weaponize her paranoia against her and turn her against Logan? That would explain why their friendship fell apart during the merge, and it would make her mini rant to Hannah in episode 22 actually make a bit of sense. I do realize that on paper, Anastasia trusting Ted isn't that much different from her trusting Spencer. But by this point in the season, Logan has provably flipped on his allies several times, and he's very close with Spencer, someone who Anastasia does not like. So I could easily see Ted bringing this up in casual conversation just to get the gears turning in her head. Upon his return, I see Ted allying himself with someone on the red team, since none of them were responsible for his elimination. And with Benji leaving not long before the rejoin, I think Ted would see Hannah in a relatively vulnerable state and try to form an alliance with her. Rather than Amelie, who acted as the angel on Hannah's shoulder, Ted would be her devil, encouraging her to play more ruthlessly and selfishly at the expense of everyone else. After all, they voted off all your friends. Why should you have to play nice with them? I have a lot of ideas for this pairing specifically, but I don't want to waste too much time, so I'll end it there. But I really like the idea of these two together. And as for Jade, once Spencer gets eliminated, she doesn't really have any kind of strategic rival to push her forward, at least not one that I can take seriously. So why not Ted? Jade is perceptive, so once Ted returns to the game, I think she'd immediately recognize him as a potential threat and aim to take him out. But Ted would realize this too, and he'd prey on Jade's self-doubt in order to throw her off her game. Not in a super manipulative way or anything, but enough to psych her out. I think he'd view Jade as an opponent playing poker with him, and he'd intentionally bluff and lie in order to make her second guess herself, which I think could be a fun way to go about it. The possibilities are endless, but unfortunately, without Season 4 rematch, we're not likely to see Ted for a while. Maybe if ONC does a Blood vs. Water season, we could see Ted compete with his son? I don't know, they'd have to get there first. All I know is that Ted deserves a proper run back, and if he can't get one, then at the very least, Jack should be able to rejoin in II4. This list was never actually a competition for the top spot, because that has been locked in for months. I love Ted Gordon and his unfathomable aura, but we only got to see like 10% of what he could have been, and he only made it this high on the list because my brain is very good at filling in the gaps. This is not a problem that I have with Ivy Berkey. I know that Ivy has her detractors, so I just want to say for the record, if you hate Ivy Berkey and your rationale is anything other than, I think she's a bit much, that's fine. But I don't trust you. Obviously, opinions are subjective and you can have whatever, you get the idea. I can't tell you how to feel about her, but if you're not an Ivy fan, then I think you have bad taste, and I think some of you might hate women. Especially considering a lot of the anti-Ivy arguments I've seen are really dumb. Like, if you're one of those people who hates Ivy because she teased Benji about his fake idol, why are you still awake? You have school tomorrow, go to bed. Ivy Berkey is easily one of the funniest, most relatable, and most charismatic characters that ONC has ever created. 90% of what she says is absolutely hysterical, which is much more of an accomplishment than it seems because a lot of the dialogue in this show is not good. Sometimes, if the VA really locks in with the performance, that terrible dialogue can somehow work. See Hannah's I thought games were supposed to be fun. Otherwise, you end up like Allie from the Season 2 beta. Some of Ivy's dialogue is likewise not very good, but it doesn't matter because Vanessa Benoit went all in on her performance and sells every line. When someone else says something weird, me and my friends make fun of them in our group chat. When Ivy says something weird, that's just Ivy Quirky, the funniest character in the season. Again, why is Benji even here? I'm not just glazing Vanessa because I know she watches my stuff. That's part of it, absolutely, but she's one of the VAs who did a lot of writing for her character, so the writer and the VA share a vision here. What that means is that there's no miscommunication with Ivy's characterization. Ivy is written to be an over-the-top, bubbly ex-theater kid who tackles every problem with an air of bravado, only to frequently fuck up somewhere because she is the definition of a fail girl. And the execution of that character is flawless. I can't imagine a better performance to encapsulate that type of character than what Vanessa gave. And you can see this in pretty much every scene that Ivy's in. My favorite example of this happens in episode 12, where Ivy tries to buddy up to Hannah in an attempt to win her over, only for her to accidentally scare Hannah and get herself voted out of the game. What makes this even funnier is that Hannah's logic is that Ivy's silver tongue makes her a threat, which, like, Ivy Berkey does not have that. This is the second time that she's talked herself into a worse position. Speaking of, let's circle back around to episode 6, because obviously this is a really big episode for her. First and foremost, I've said it before, but it bears repeating, Ivy has the best singing voice in the entire season, and it is not even close. I don't have the strength to choose between her and Aiden, so I'll just let them share the top spot together. Ivy's cover of This Blue Moon is incredible. I never thought we'd get a DC character with Disney princess vibrato, but Ivy has it and she absolutely steals the show. But looking back at the episode, I don't think that was intentional. Ivy was clearly intended to come off as more of a diva in the first half of the episode, with Jade getting mad at her for assuming the main character role in their performance. And then the scene where she bargains with the judges for more points was clearly meant to reflect negatively on her as well. But I think Ivy's just too charming to ever come off that way. I don't see Ivy being a diva gunning for the main character role. I just see an actress excited to perform and Jade just being really snappy for some reason. I don't think Ivy was acting entitled when she questioned the host. I think that Derek and Emily have horrible music taste and might be deaf. I like all 4 of the songs in this episode, but I'm not even going to entertain the idea like the other 3 even slightly compare to Blue Moon. I know that I Don't Care is the most popular of the 4, but I also know that the average Disventure Camp fan tends to skew a little bit younger. I did expect Emily and Derek to have a lot more sense though. What do you mean you're docking points because Ivy sang more than the other 2? That's like asking Beyonce to stop singing so that Nick Cannon can get a turn. You don't do that. Okay, low-key, I feel bad about making that comparison because Zade and Spencer genuinely do sing well. I just don't really like Emily and Derek's logic, especially since Linda only got like 1 line in On My Way and they didn't say anything about that. But I really do like Ivy's role in this challenge because her excitement is infectious and I was really rooting for her the whole way through. The scene after the challenge with Zade is one of my favorites for a variety of reasons. I like how we get to see Ivy's vulnerable side after several episodes of being comedic relief. I think her having a breakdown after failing this challenge was the perfect time to explore that side of her. More than that, seeing Ivy doubt her abilities after flubbing the challenge is deeply relatable for me. I'm not an actress in the same way that Ivy is, but there is a degree of acting involved in my commentary. I'm technically performing right now. I'm also a writer, and I have spent a lot of time honing my skill. And believe me, after you've done that for a while, you start getting very particular about what you make. The bar keeps rising, and falling short of your personal standards does not feel good. I compare myself to other people in similar fields way more than I really should, and I've battled with imposter syndrome a lot because of that. I don't think any show in the total drama format has really captured that feeling like Ivy has, so I can't help but identify with her. I understand why she went out when she did. DC4 wanted its merge to be melodramatic and serious, and Ivy was far too energetic. She definitely would have ruined the angst by being too joyful. I'm not gonna exaggerate this section any more than I need to. Ivy is my favorite character in DC4 because she's funny, I love her performance, and I relate to a lot of her personal struggles. And while Ivy may be the best of them, the vast majority of this cast really did impress me. I enjoyed the newbies in this season more than I enjoyed the season 1 and 2 casts in their initial season. It's clear that ONC took the feedback from All Stars to heart, and while in some areas they may have overcorrected, I do appreciate that they took a step back and allowed these guys to actually get along with each other. Not everyone is as good as they could be, but everyone's got some positives worth talking about. And with this script coming in at just about 67 pages by this point, I really hope I was able to do that, because otherwise I just wasted 2 weeks. Anyway, now that that's done, Keith Yeti, what do you think?
You forgot Emily.
I can't keep doing this anymore, Keith Yeti. This video is 2 hours. It's been multiple weeks. I can't do this.
Please?
Okay, yeah, you're right. I'm better now.
Where does she go?
She's fine. I like what she provided to the season. She did really well when she took over as a host, even though it only lasted for a few episodes. I would put her above Anastasia. Is that good?
Yes, that should be every character from the first 4 seasons.
Okay, thank goodness, because honestly, I am exhausted. I still don't know if I've fully recovered from the All-Stars video, so I can only imagine that editing Lexi is having the time of her life putting this together. Actually, I'm doing pretty well. The hardest part was definitely the script, oh my god. DC4 has been a journey. Reviewing every episode over the course of like 18 months was definitely tough, but I'm still glad I did it. And I'm glad I got to give this cast such a detailed breakdown because, as my personal favorite cast in the series, I think they've earned it. But that's just me. What do you all think of this cast? Feel free to let me know in the comments below. And while you're doing that, I'm gonna give a huge shout out to my channel members. Saltine My Beloved, Factually False, Commander Cone, MI37000, Sour Guts, Nachos, Shoelace, Hadori Unlimited, Sheepishly, Neonite, Coco Fondula, Ryu, I Am Critterling, Adrian, Kosa, Skohei, Scorpion Stinger, and Leandrinha Raja. As always, you guys are the best. Thank you so much for your support. And I'd also like to give a big thank you to all of you for getting this channel to over 10,000 subscribers. That is such a big number and one that I never thought this channel would have. Now, normally when people reach this milestone, they have a sub-special ready. I do not at the moment, but I'm going to go all out for it, and I think you're really going to enjoy what I have planned. For lore purposes, 2 more videos are going to have to be released before we get there, but I promise you the wait will be worth it. In the meantime, if you're interested in supporting me monetarily, you can click the join button down below and become a channel member. But if you don't want to spend any money, I totally get it. You can still support the channel by liking, commenting, hyping the video, and subscribing to the channel. If you like my content and want to see more, this really does help. Anyway, yeah, this video is why I haven't been posting as much recently. I hope you all enjoyed the movie. See you next time.
Hi Logan. You will have to forgive Paula. She's not very fond of you. I thought bringing you to the water would calm your nerves. I also thought it would be funny to watch you grow again. She has a plan, you know, for this, not for you though, what a shame. But I've seen the signs. Disventure camp is a finite resource. When the will runs dry, we'll move on to another world. Luckily for you, I'm going to take you with me.